Okay. Okay, we'll begin. This meeting is a public work session where the board will hear a variety of reports and have discussion regarding topics which may be scheduled for official action at a future meeting. During this meeting, we will not be voting. We will not be voting or making the final decision on any topic. Questions and comments by members of the audience will be limited to those topics on the agenda only for this evening. So again, remember, we're talking about only what's on the agenda tonight. It's a work session. Tonight we will also present proclamations to outstanding students. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. Saying that, we'll all turn to our next page. It is not on the agenda, but as I said earlier, we will do student proclamations first for outstanding students. I'd like to turn this part of the meeting over to Mr. Ken Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. I would then like to invite one of our music instructors, Mr. Peter New, to come to the podium, please. While Mr. New is coming to the podium, I'd like to announce that tonight we're going to honor members of the Pembroke Middle School Jazz Band. Members of the Pembroke Middle School Jazz Band have recently returned from a command performance at a distant place, and I'll ask Mr. New to tell you about that.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. Last spring, we submitted an audition tape to the International Jazz Educators Association, and this organization reviewed tapes from all over the world and selected our students to do a performance at their annual convention. And this took place 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Atlanta Marriott. And these students were the only middle school in the country selected to perform. There was one other middle school that was a local group in their showcase of local talents, but this was the only middle school group from the country to perform at this convention. We had a guest soloist by the name of Mike Vax, who's a former lead trumpet of the Stan Kenton Orchestra, who met us from California and did our concert with us. And in addition, this group will also be performing at the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association convention in April. And again, they are the only middle school in Pennsylvania to be performing at this convention as well. So we're quite pleased with the accomplishments of our students this year.
Thank you, Mr. New. Before we introduce each of the students and present the proclamation, I'd like to read for the benefit of the audience, the television audience, and the parents who are here, the proclamation which names each student. Whereas many North Penn School District students individually and collectively perform distinguished service to their school in many activities, and whereas the reputation and image of the North Penn School District is built and enhanced by the performance of its faculty and students, and whereas the accomplishments of individual students in academic, artistic, athletic, leadership, literary, and musical endeavors bring positive community interest in school programs, and whereas the future of any community rests in the hands of its responsible youth. And then we name each student in these proclamations, and we say, whereas this student has earned considerable recognition for his school and community by participating as a member of the Pembroke Jazz Ensemble, which was the only middle school group selected to perform at the International Association of Jazz Educators in Atlanta, Georgia in January 1996. Now therefore be it resolved that the North Penn Board of School Directors go on record this 6th day of February, honoring the spirit and accomplishment of this exemplary performance. Let's recognize the performance. Names?
Yes, I do.
Would you call each name and ask the student to come to Mr. Clemens, please?
Sure. Lee Allbacher, Craig Allen, Rachel Berman, Sagar Bhatt, Brian Endline, Joseph Evans, Jason Fine, Michael Gubatoso, James Haig, Shane Hazelbarth, Ryan Hollenbach, Mina Lee, Michael Legower, Chris Mamroll, Laura Mature, Stephen McElhenney, Matthew Morvan, Simone Park, Deepa Patel, Jeremy Clymet, Matthew Reed, John Riley, Laura Rogan, Jared Schultz, William Schaefer, Kyle Slemmer, John Spinella, Aaron Stang, Ramit Wadera, Chris Wildman, Martin Whitmer.
Okay, let's give another round of applause.
On behalf of the board and the administration, I'd like to not only acknowledge the contribution that these students have made, but I'd like to thank the parents for their support, all the hours of driving, all the lessons, and all the interest and support. So to you, Mr. New, to the parents, and to these students, you make us proud. Thank you.
Mr. Weir, may I add that there's an incredibly beaming principal back there.
My apologies. She is beaming. Thank you. Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
I told you when she called, I called She called me and I
We'll wait a few more minutes as people leave.
Your experiences have been positive.
Hi, Judy. Very good. Yourself?
Yes.
Yes.
I told Alicia not before 11.
Let's hope we're right.
Right.
Let's hope we're right. That's it.
Okay, at the last work session where we left off, I believe I said to the community that we would tackle middle school boundaries first, and I plan to stick to my word on that. If you all want to take a look at the agenda for one moment, what I plan to do is we'll cover middle school boundaries, and then we'll have an audience of citizen after that, and it will continue the same way. We'll do an audience of citizens after each individual topic. We have a lot to cover tonight, and again, many people were patient that night. I appreciate that. It was a long night. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate. So again, we'll start with boundaries, and then we'll conclude secondary education with the middle school teaming and honors. Then we'll move on to finance. So as part of that, I will turn this part of the program over to Dr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens.
You're welcome.
Sometime prior to my being appointed Director of Secondary Education, a committee was formed to take a look at boundaries for the 3 middle schools for the 1996-97 school year. I would like to take this opportunity to thank those persons whose names appear on a green sheet for their time and for their efforts. And to these committee people, we say thank you very much. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the middle school principals, and a very special thank you to my left hand here, Mrs. Clark, for all the work she did with this boundary committee and paperwork. Just as a brief background, this committee charge was to develop a boundary that fit the criteria as they established. The committee had the following considerations for determining what the boundaries would be. One was future growth, housing starts, and to get a feel for the future growth and the housing starts, Dr. Sugar and Mrs. Clark visited the townships to talk with persons in authority there to find out what housing starts were planned and what housing starts they knew about. The second consideration was socioeconomic balance, and the third was implications of splitting or not splitting the elementary areas, municipalities, and the communities in which the youngsters lived, and the other was proximity to students to each building and their bus riding time. As a result of those deliberations, and there were several meetings held, the committee is recommending Exhibit A that you have. And that boundary says that they would like for the 1996 school year to have those numbers as indicated on the chart represented in those schools. If you turn the map to the map, you will see that one of the considerations also was that there be main thoroughfares as what they would use for the dividing lines, and that is indicated on that map. Major roads and housing starts were prefaces, and I'm not sure, Mr. Clemens, what else I can say. It seems rather, it's visual, and it's here, and the numbers are here, and I can answer questions, but I'm not sure what more I can say, except that this is the committee's recommendation. This is a recommendation of the Director of Secondary Education as well.
I think that's fine. I think that you've said what you needed to say. At this point, I'd like to talk for a moment and explain to the community what else remains in the packet as far as boundaries. And after I give my explanation, then I'll turn it over and open it up for questions to the board. The last 3 weeks were some pretty chaotic weeks for myself as a board member. With the weather, with the boundaries, I found myself late at night looking at numbers, getting frustrated with numbers, and trying to come to grips with what I thought was a fair boundary. When Dr. Bond first presented what the boundary looked to me, which I believe was about less than a week, or right about a week before we were to have our work session on it, I told Dr. Bond that I thought that the boundaries could work the way that it was presented by the committee, but that it was not really what I recalled as a board member back in the summer of 1994 as what the boundaries looked like. As what I felt that we as a board at the time were closing in on, again, as what the boundaries would look like. Some of the people here may recall, that's the time when the board came up with the rec camp, for lack of better words, the rec camp plan, and we moved into Pendale. After receiving those boundaries, or the proposed what the boundary would look like, I started conversation with Dr. Bond rather quickly, as quickly as I felt I could, not waiting to the last minute, and not a 10th or 11th hour decision, but something that I felt as a board member I was expediting as quickly as possible. And I believe that Dr. Bond would back me up on that. Anyway, I conferred with board member Mrs. Scher, talked to her about what she might recall, what she felt at the time what the boundaries were possibly going to look like back in 1994. Both of us realizing that, yes, indeed, they would have fed of what at the time would have been two different high schools, but to the two of us, that really didn't matter. And I talked with Mrs. Scher quite a bit, and after talking with Mrs. Scher, I felt that it was important to find out if there was support from a majority of the other board members to support, or at least look and have an open mind towards an alternate plan, or as I would call it, the plan, what it looked like back in the summer of 1994. After talking to what I felt and knew was a majority of the board, I knew I had support to at least look at an alternative plan. At that time, all the phone calls were made. I believe it was about the day before we were going to have the work session. You can all recall, if you were here, the work session the night that we had the freeze in the parking lot. Dr. Bond's answer to me was, Tom, the alternate plan works, the numbers work, and we will submit, or I will put the plan in the packet that night if you desire. And I said, yes, I desire to be in there. So that night, Dr. Bond did include that alternate plan, and there were no numbers attached. And I'd like to apologize to any people who are out in the audience that those numbers weren't there. Those numbers were not deliberately hidden. They weren't there because it was a lack of time, and it was, Dr. Bond assured me that the numbers work. I did receive some phone calls from community members who were disturbed, who were disappointed that the numbers weren't there. Hence, tonight, as you can see, I'd ask that you would turn to the second page, which is called, effective September 1996, map. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. It says effective September 1996, map B. That was what was presented to the community that night, map B. And there were no numbers attached to that. It was just map B. Now if you turn to the back, there are numbers attached to map B. And those numbers that are attached, again, Dr. Bond assured me that those numbers did indeed work. However, I did receive phone calls from different members in the community, also from some board members, and over this past weeks, board members agreed that there perhaps could be a better looking plan than the alternate plan. Hence, there is now a third map called alternate plan B1. B1.
One minor adjustment.
You'll see one line difference. If you all would look at map B, in the bottom right corner, you will see a squiggly line that separates Bridle Path and Montgomery. If you turn back to map B1, that line is now straight, and that line has been moved up, and it now does take off a bottom portion of Bridle Path Elementary. But you will see that map B1 also has numbers behind it to support that map B1 also works. In saying that, I think at this point I can conclude by saying that, hold on, I gotta get my notes here. The main reason that this board member feels that the map B1 is the best plan for this community to move forward is that I feel is that's where the school board was at the time, back in 1994, after many hearings with the community. If you recall, they were at the high school, that's where the board was heading. That's number one. The number two part, the number two reason that brings me to state why I feel the alternate plan is B1 is a better plan is that in the committee's plan, and I'll go ahead and say it, I live in Temenson Township and my kids are in Inglewood. I won't hold that back at all. When I looked at the committee's plan, Temenson Township and Inglewood School, that was the only municipality and the only school that got split up three ways. All of the other communities and all of the other elementary schools either went to one middle school or at the most got split into two. And I felt that Temenson Township and that Inglewood should have as fair shot as any of the other schools and municipalities. And with the alternate plan, it only splits Temenson and Inglewood going to two middle schools like the rest. And I looked at the four part of the charge to the committee where it's in here in your packet. The committee considered the four guidelines, and I talked to Dr. Bond and I talked to Dr. Venema, and they both agreed that all four of those were of equal value. In other words, future population growth wasn't number one, socioeconomic number two, that the committee felt that these were all of equal value. So therefore, implementation to splitting, not splitting of elementary municipalities was every bit as important reason as the other three. So those are the two reasons where I felt that alternate plan B1 better serve the entire school district. And that concludes my comments. Now I'll open it up to the board.
May I just...
Oh, sure. Yeah, you didn't say much in the beginning. You might have a little to add on now.
Yeah, I do. First, I'd like to make it clear, because regardless as to how we feel and respond to this boundary question, I think it should be clear that Mr. Clemens and others on the board who came to me about boundaries did that early on, and that we did meet with the boundary committee and presented an alternate plan to the committee. The committee, having heard that, said that they still wanted to present their original plan. The concern that Dr. Venema has to B1 is how quickly we get to 900. He and I differ on that concern, but I'd like to make it clear that that's the case there. In terms of splitting the elementary school, when we talked about that in committee, the committee felt that it wasn't as important to keep all the schools together as previous committees had felt. So just a point of clarification.
Okay. Then I'll take, before I open it up, I'll take one more chance for a point of clarification.
Right.
Fortunately, behind the committee's map, boundary, that's the only one that shows housing starts. And that's another thing that as a board member I took a close look at. The bottom line is the biggest area of housing starts is at Penn Field, with 725.
That's correct.
The lowest would be at Penn Brook.
Correct.
The middle would be at Penn Dale.
Right.
I need to say is I also looked at that and felt that with either the committee's plan or the alternate plan, not the alternate plan B1, the committee's plan or the alternate plan, if you look at both of those charts, both of those plans, Penndale gets to be over 1,500 kids by the year 2000. And I do have a concern that if indeed housing starts for the Penfield area do go as quickly as they are projected, that we could have to look, and by the year 2000, I need to say that as a board member, I may have to be, well, that might be another board member, but someone's going to have to be open to readjusting these lines for the growth for Penfield to get into Penndale. And alternate plan B1 keeps Penndale down at in the 1300s, which would allow for children from Penn Field to move into Penndale if there would be a growth problem in the Penfield area. And I need, then it's good that we point that out. Okay. Dr. Bond, anything else? One last statement, then I'll open it up. I do want to make it perfectly clear to the community that Dr. Bond and Dr. Venema made it perfectly clear to me that they feel and they back the committee's plan 100%. They feel that the committee's plan is a better plan. And they had, I believe when Dr. Bond did meet with the committee that Tuesday morning before the meeting, at the time the committee said that they told Dr. Bond they wanted the plan presented as they had done.
That was a consensus. There were two people in the committee
Right.
who could have gone either way.
Right.
And my response to Mr. Clemens has been relative to numbers. And given the housing starts and the numbers of all of these plans, the numbers fit. And that's the point that
Right.
you're making, I want to confirm.
Right. Okay. We'll start on this side. Unless Mr. Schilling has any questions, we'll go to Ms. Sure. John? We'll start with John, then we'll come around.
No, I just wanted to ask Dr. Bond again, what, in regards to the committee and regards to B1 plan, what do you feel is, you know, what do you differ on? I mean, what's wrong with B1 as comparison to the committee's plan? Can you reiterate that, please?
Yeah. The committee felt that it was important to equalize as much as possible Penfield and Pembroke, and leave space at Penndale for the growth. Additionally, they felt that the boundaries at 309 was crucial. That was a transportation concern, a community concern to keep 309 one side or the other. The other is that they looked at the socioeconomic piece, and they felt that that was important. The other is, maybe they'd probably be better off to say this, but it was the fourth. They felt that given the four criteria that they established, major thoroughfares, numbers, particularly evening numbers in Penfield and Pembroke, because they began asking a question: if you have significantly more students in one school than the other, and I don't know what significant is anymore, because I'm not sure that's. Will this board allow all the courses to run in one school as running the other? And that's also a question as it relates to Penndale. If Penndale has more students and they can run an Algebra 2 class, will Penfield and Pembroke be able to run an Algebra 2 class as well? But some of the committee people may be able to answer that question better than myself. But those are some of the things that we had talked about.
Thank you. Okay,
Anything else, John?
that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sheriff?
Dr. Bond, I do want to follow up on a couple of those points, because I looked at it as a transportation issue as well as others. And I have to tell you, if you have a visual here, I think it's easier being able to cross over once, bring your routes over, and basically you can get to Pembroke without crossing over 202, 309, other than at the lower end, the less congested area. And actually, with Plan B, you're able to stay from one side of 202 moving up to Penndale and the other side to Pembroke. So, you know, I guess also the same issue comes up as to, I don't see a difference between the numbers of the committee, a significant difference, to alleviate any of those questions regarding the disparity in enrollment that we're going to deal with at Pembroke versus Penndale and Penfield. That is an issue that will have to be dealt with no matter which plan we approve, or if someone wants to create 5 others, unless we're going to shut down wings at our junior high. I think to add to Tom's historical perspective, it's important to me because this was the original committee's plan from February of '94. It does have a high school line added there, but basically, you'll look and you'll see it's very similar to what they're presenting now, 2 years later. This plan was in February, and basically what you see in Plans B was developed and forwarded to us by the administration in either March or April of 1994. And it was left off at that point and failed to be followed through with a formal vote only because redistricting was postponed. As far as the committee's frustration, I sincerely apologize, and in a sense, I share their frustration. When mention of a committee came up in October, I immediately approached Dr. Bose, and I explained the history to let him know that we've already been here before. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We had a map prepared and ready to be voted on that came through hours and hours of community input. Meetings at Gwinnett Square, meetings at the high school. Much more dialogue than perhaps these plans will lead to, but nonetheless, that was a plan that went through community input process. And B was where generally a different board, but nonetheless a board majority was prepared to head. And it was my impression all through this process, since October until I received the committee's map, that in fact the committee was picking up where we left off and actually focusing on fine-tuning the board's intended plan from April. And through miscommunication, it was being conveyed that they were in fact working on that plan. So there was no motivation for me to feel that I needed to have any further discussion on that. And it was quite a surprise to me to see that we were back to the original plan that everyone had railed against. When it comes to the numbers, I will say that I was concerned about the numbers being placed at Penfield and Pembroke, both by the committee and with a desire to see them drawn down, while in the meantime, the committee had a strong feeling about not having Penndale up into the 1,400 range. The only way to meet that need was to then, of course, have enrollments at Penfield and Pembroke a little higher. I look towards this plan, dragging our enrollment down at the beginning to where it is. A positive in that I believe on the heels of the Penndale project, it is going to be absolutely necessary for us to invest in upgrading and updating the Penfield and Pembroke schools. I believe we're going to have attention in the areas of the science department and perhaps computer technology, and discussions with Dr. Bourne are to take place next week for us to do a full evaluation of what's going to be needed to provide equal curriculum opportunity there. And as far as the 900 at Pembroke, Tom, I did an evaluation of the feeding schools. And because I was nervous with that number, it is in the year 2000, but I did see that as these schools were growing along during this period pretty evenly, you were pretty much having an escalation that's pretty close. I think as close as you can in division. But in the year 2000, when you have Pembroke at 200, as you follow through the grade levels that they represent, the feeding schools into Pembroke are actually going into a modest decline. At least the grade levels of the existing students inside the district for those feeder elementary schools are showing a decrease as you move from the second grade to the first grade that would be moving forward. And the kindergarten follows too in that pattern, giving some offset to the incoming students that might come a little bit higher than the outgoing students. So I firmly believe that B1 does less to divide so many different townships, to divide so many different communities, and I believe that it's just a more logical way of dividing the district, following the horizontal pattern rather than, cutting off at the top and then zigzagging down the middle. And I think if you take a good look at how many townships are being broken out, I mean, Penfield pretty much stays the same with Tillmanson, Hatfield Borough, and part of Hatfield Township. In Penndale, the span of the population is Colmar, Line, Lexington, part of Tillmanson, part of Hatfield Township, Lansdale, part of Montgomery. Then at Gwinnett, at the Pembroke School, you've got another part of Tillmanson, part of Upper Gwinnett, part of North Wales, part of Montgomery, part of Lansdale Borough. So, I understand their desire to have a socioeconomic balance, but I don't find our community so offset with these big pockets of social differences that we would need to have to divide up so many different communities into each of the 3 schools. I hope the board will consider that.
Okay, any other questions, comments, Mrs. Scher?
Only if there's any other additions that would elevate, you know, the committee's plan up above the other than perhaps just to lend support to the recommendation.
You had the recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Allen? Mr. Allen?
Yeah, a couple comments. First is I find it ironic that I guess 2 months ago, we just had a new school board that overturned what 2 school boards had done in the past concerning a second high school. And now all of a sudden, we're supposed to do what they did for some insignificant family. When we started this process, when I started it, I was asked to be on the committee. And frankly, from a personal point of view, I had no concerns of what history was. I was concerned about today and the future. I think everybody should know that the board or the committee was asked numerous times by me and informed and asked, is there anybody that doesn't disagree? There was never anybody that didn't agree with the recommendation of the committee. So they were given ample opportunity to have a minority report, which is what I have been asked. Is there anybody that did not agree with the committee? The answer is no. I know I asked them twice, and I wanted to make sure they knew they had the perfect right to present their own plan. And this has nothing to do with what we're speaking about, but in general, it has been a question. Everybody had the knowledge and the opportunity to make a second plan. I also find it ironic that people that will recommend that we have committees and volunteers to do all these things they want done on other issues will take a committee's logical hard work, what I would call, well, I'll describe the work later, but just say I don't like it and I'm going to do it myself. I don't know why we ever have a volunteer committee in this school district. Having said that, I'd like to thank all the people that did serve on the committee. And I would just like to describe a little bit of what impressed me about the workings of the committee that we had. The first thing was that these people, there was a representative from every elementary school, and it happened to be the elected home and school president from each school. So I considered that to be a representative person of that school. And I was very concerned that everybody was going to come to this committee worried about their school, and only their school. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised how every person on that committee thought globally about North Penn, not about their particular elementary school. And I was surprised, and I thank you all very much. You should be all proud of yourself, because I'm sure you had pressures on you to take care of your own. And you did a very nice job. As far as these maps go, pick one. I don't know what's going to happen in 2000. It's only 4 years away. We understood that what we're doing is a 4 or 5 year project, probably going to be open for changes as situations change with population within the school district. We did have the blessing of the transportation department. We had the approval of everybody, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it's the only way to do it. What I think we're doing, though, is again saying to people, go ahead and volunteer, but we'll ignore you if we please. Thank you.
Mr. Hill. Now let's go around. We can come back. Mr. Hill.
I've listened to the dialogue about the plans, and as Mr. Allen said, I think the plans all have their advantages and disadvantages. I think in the final analysis, I think the B1 plan in the long-range planning probably, from my analysis, is the best one to go with. But I'm a little taken back by Mr. Allen's comments regarding the committee. I think every board member here is appreciative of any community support we get, whether it be on a committee or as an individual or attending meetings or whatever. I think all the board members here are appreciative of that effort. If at some time the board in its final decisions does not entirely accept or modifies, or for some reason does not accept the recommendation of that committee, does not degrade the work of that committee, because that's adding input, and this information is always useful and it can be used at other times and used for other reasons. But I don't think this board should be condemned if we decide to use a different plan or a different thing than the committee recommended, as saying that the committee process is wrong or the committee process is bad. In contrary, I think it's the right thing to do, and we should do that as much as we can. But we also cannot expect this board or any board to absolutely accept the committee report. It's another input as we get inputs from many different sources. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, come over to this side. Don?
Okay.
Let's keep going right around.
Right. President Clements, as you know, last week many of us participated in a process called strategic planning, as it was led by Dr. Mangano. And if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times by various community folks and teachers and administrators. I heard the word parity, and it wasn't referring to the teachers' union. It was referring to site, opportunity, curriculum, labs, program, and down to the very buildings, parity among all the buildings. Upgrading buildings so that all students have as much an opportunity from school to school as the next guy. So as I looked at Plan B1 that was recently submitted and placed it up against the plan being recommended by the committee, I look at the year 2000, that's where my immediate focus, that's where I immediately focused. And I see Pembroke is going to be up in anticipation of about 130 more students. Penfield seems to be dead on, and we were able to draw down on Penndale by about 100 and I guess what's that, 130, whatever, students. And I saw an effort to show some parity here, which is what I heard about the 3 straight days. I know as one parent, I am not the least bit concerned in Pembroke, where my kids go to school, that there'll be 130 more kids in the building. I'm far more concerned with the fact that Penndale is going to have superb science labs in comparison to Pembroke and Penfield. I'm not real concerned about the size of my kid's pond, but I certainly would be concerned about the quality of the water in it. I trust myself as a parent, I trust the teachers, I trust the administrators, but what I get concerned about is when there is in fact disparity in the curriculum and in the inventory of supplies, materials, and tools necessary to do the job properly. So I will be supporting B1 without a doubt. I'm not a Penndale parent, but if I was, I'd certainly appreciate some of the drawdown provided in B1 to Penndale. And hope that once we get past these boundaries, we can start looking at science labs at Pembroke and Penfield and focus there where it's really necessary, not the 130 extra kids. As for Mr. Allen's comments in regards to committees, sometimes, Mr. Allen, committees do feel unappreciated. It's a shame that people feel that way. But what's this board but a committee of 9? And how often do we feel quite appreciated month after month? So, you know, some of us, after 4 years, didn't always have our will or way prevail, but you know, you get over it and you move on. So, everybody's effort is appreciated, and if they don't feel that way, geez, you know, what else can be said? We do our best up here, they do their best out there, and we all learn from it somehow. That's all I have to say.
Mrs. Krieger.
Mr. Clements. First of all, I'd like to disclose to the board and to members here in the audience tonight, as well as our viewing members at home, I received a total of 29 phone calls at my home over the last 2 weeks in regards to the proposed boundaries. The biggest complaint, of course, was from the constituents who live in my neighboring area of the school district in regards to the continuation of separating children that are now attending Bridle Path, much to the chagrin of a lot of the parents that I heard from, and their desire to have at least the middle school years cohesive in nature, that the children in those neighborhoods would all attend the same middle schools. I forwarded my comments to Mrs. Scheer, and I thank you very much for providing them to Mr. Clemens. And I also agree and will be supporting MAP B1 based on what I've just disclosed. However, the entire boundaries question has brought to mind significant deliberation on my part in why we're even here discussing this. I would like to remind the members of the community that the whole creation of our 3 junior high facilities was precipitated on the recommendation by previous boards to build a second high school. This board has clearly stated it does not intend to do that. So in having said that, Dr. Bono will be submitting to you 3 simple questions. You do not have to respond to me tonight. Once again, I would like your responses in writing. The first question being, since the North Penn School District is no longer building a second high school, why would it still be necessary to establish 3 junior highs, grades 7, 8, and 9? And I would like a thorough explanation to that question. Number 2, should this current school board decide to address the current growth issues K through 12, please explain why it would be necessary to implement 3 junior high schools in the next instructional year, being 96-97. And number 3, do you think it may be premature to reconfigure our middle school grade levels prior to this board's approval of the current long-range strategic plan that is in process, and if not, why? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Krieger?
No, that's it.
Okay. David?
I didn't receive any phone calls about boundaries. Dr. Bond, in your opinion, were all 4 of the guidelines that were presented to the committee, were they fairly evaluated, and did the committee have all the relevant information to make a decision?
Yes.
And the committee's recommendation was unanimous?
Yes.
Okay. In light of that, I intend to support the committee's recommendation, and I also believe that for the rest of this, unless there's some really compelling facts that we can bring to light and not subjective opinions that lead to a disagreement with the committee's recommendations, we run the serious risk of destroying the effectiveness of our use of community members at a time when we absolutely need them the most. And again, unless there are overwhelming issues that alter the premises that the committee used to come to their decision, I urge this board to adopt the original committee recommendation and assure present and future community members that their participation is important and valued. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Mosey.
Dr. Bond, if you recall, that Tuesday morning on the 16th of January, you reconvened the committee and you invited me to attend.
Yes.
Didn't Dr. Venema say that he did not show the old map because it was one that was drawn up in the event that we had a second high school, and he didn't feel it was necessary for that committee to see this map, this P1 map? If I recall, I think he said that.
Yeah, I do. The question was directed to Dr. Bond, not to the audience. You will all have your chance, okay?
Because if I recall, when I spoke that morning, and I had said to the group, I said that when we ask for committees, we ask the committee to be our eyes and ears and to collect information and make recommendations. And I said that the board may not always agree with what you agree with. We try to collect information from a myriad of sources to make an intelligent decision. It has been my contention all along that we use our facilities to the maximum, that we allow for growth, and the numbers fit, as you concurred earlier and you concurred in previous conversations with Mr. Clemens. and that we have proper and maximum use of our transportation resources. And I don't see a problem. In fact, I think that I'm a little dismayed if anyone is upset with the fact that they serve on a committee, and because the board does not go along with their recommendations to the letter, that they don't feel that they're worthwhile. I don't think that anyone in this country should volunteer their services unless they feel that, you know, they're making a contribution. However, they should also understand that, you know, what you say, it may not you know, go along with the powers to be. And I just feel that, to me, looking at the plan, it fits. It allows for maximum use of our buildings. It allows for proper use of our transportation facilities, and it allows for growth. And I would be voting for B1, Mr. Clemens. Thank you.
Mr. Clemens, relative to this issue of the first map has come up several times. I don't know that it's about this first map, but if in fact it is, I'd like to clear it up so that everyone has a clear understanding of what happened. Do you find that necessary or not?
I think.
Sure, I'd give it a shot.
Okay, why don't we do that? And when this committee originated,
I think we ought to get everything out on the table.
all right, well, let's do that.
Right.
When this committee originated, Dr. Venema dealt with that piece, and with your permission, I'd like him to come to the podium and address
Sure.
that topic so we can clear that up
Sure.
once and for all.
Come across that.
Thanks, Dr. Vaughn. I just need to have you understand the logic that I used in establishing getting the committee started. Remembering, since I was involved the last time the boundaries were established in the middle schools, a committee was formed and made a recommendation, and that recommendation was brought to the board. Lots of discussion occurred. One of the biggest issues and concerns about the original committee's report at that time was that they did not consider fully enough, in the board's opinion, the potential of a second high school. As a result of that meeting, and maybe there were more than one, we went back to the drawing board at that time and created a new plan that better accommodated the high school situation. And that was the map that Mrs. Scheer was referring to. It was presented in that context, and that was, you're right, the last map that was presented to the committee before the plan was scrapped and the decision to reorganize was canceled so that we could accommodate the renovations at Penndale. As we began the committee this time, my approach was to go back to what the committee had done in the original recommendations and use that as the base. Actually, before we even got into that, I talked to them about the strategies that we might use as a committee to approach the whole issue. Do we start from scratch, or do we start from some logical point? And my feeling was that the committee agreed that the recommendation of the committee prior, 1993, 1994, was a good starting point. And therefore, all of our work began from that point and moved forward. So it certainly wasn't my intent not to bring forth any maps. I think it came as a result of some logical discussion that represented a good starting point, not only in my opinion, but in the opinion of the committee.
Question.
Yeah.
Dr. Benjamin, did you also give the committee the transcripts of the meetings in which the community railed against that original plan and recommendation? Because I can tell you I have reviewed them, and it was beyond a second high school. This is the original plan, that's their plan. It has second high school lines on it. It was designed also with a second high school. The testimony showed the arguments regarding Tolmenson being divided, so many different neighborhoods and communities being divided, the disparity in the schools, which people do have to accept. There's some things that you can weed through and you can say this is a reality, we have to deal with it. But the plan that did come forward from the administration and the feelings of the board back then had far more to do with the design of the plan, overall design of the plan, than it did the fact that there was a second high school in the picture. it was far beyond that. And perhaps if they'd seen the testimony, maybe there would have been greater understanding. But while you were leaving them with that plan, I was, from the very beginning of the committee being appointed, under the impression they would be picking up with the plan that the board intended to approve. And in fact, perhaps this answers to you, David, in a sense that I also believe that that plan would be the starting base and it would be fine-tuned by the subsequent committee, that they would not be going back and starting over or starting back with where the original committee left off, but where we as a board had left off. And it would be a matter of updating for demographics, fine-tuning it, and suiting it up for the whatever new numbers would come forward. It's unfortunate that it's occurred, but David, believe me, I wouldn't have supported a committee under these conditions. I wouldn't have involved them in this to begin over when we had so much community consensus behind the final product of the last map.
Why would this committee
I would not have
assume
done
that
that.
this board would want anything to do with the previous board has done?
Well, it was, let me tell you, I will tell, he asked me.
Folks, we have a lot to, Vicki, we have a lot to do tonight. I believe, yes, but I believe I heard that there were at least a majority of board that supported B1. We can deliberate on this all night.
Well, it took a
I believe
crossover, though.
we tried to give explanations as to where we are. Dr. Bond may want to conclude, but I'd really like to bring this issue to close and open it up to the audience.
I thank
I want
you.
to acknowledge, thank you, Dr. Venom.
I thank
I also
you.
want to acknowledge
thanks,
that
Don.
it's,
Don.
that the liaison to the secondary school was at that meeting and did in fact say the things that he said tonight. And I appreciate that. I appreciate any time a board member comes to those things. And as a result of that, he had a clear understanding of what we were doing, and we had a clear understanding of where he was on this topic. I think that we have to, what we have here, as I see it, is a situation where we could debate for weeks, and you could draw something out of a hat and go research and debate that, or you could go back to the same time and get the other one and debate that. Anyone on this board could, anyone in this room could. I'm not sure that the debate is clearly about boundaries, but if it's clearly about boundaries, there's any number of ways to create that. You know, my concern is severalfold, but primarily is I want a boundary. You know, I want a boundary. The board knows where I stand and where the committee stands. We can open it up to the audience of citizens, but I want boundaries. That's
Right. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, well, it's time to move on.
Tom, excuse me, I have to,
Okay, sure.
since I was on the committee,
Sure.
I think what Dr. Bowen has said and what I said earlier is pick a map, none of them are wrong. What bothers me about the whole thing is that I was asked to be on the committee was formed, I asked the board, what do they want, I got no input. Then we get all done, and all of a sudden there's input. And if somebody had said, let's start here, this is what we're looking for, but if we're going to do these committees, we can't just say, go do your work, and then we'll tell you what we want. And that's what this is.
Dr. Bowman.
We have to say, this is, the board wants you to start here, or this is where we want you to end up, or whatever it is, but we can't just, we always do it, and it's not just this time, it's we've done it in the past.
Okay,
We've got to have direction for them, and it's just not right.
Right, and I plan to give the administration direction next Thursday night, Mr. Allen. So in saying that, which plan do you support, Mr. Schilling?
B1.
Mrs. Scher?
Well, this is not a vote.
It's not a vote, but I need to know if I have consensus to get it on for next
Well, are we
Thursday.
ready for the-
Okay, some board members have already publicly said which plan they support. And certainly I'll open up to the audience of citizens, okay? But we have to get consensus to get it on for next Thursday night.
I thought that was isn't that the purpose of the work session, is for items that will appear on the action meeting to discuss those?
Exactly. Right, well, we can do, right, okay. Consensus to put B1 on the agenda, but we can do that after the audience, that's fine. But my point is, Mr. Weitz, I don't feel it's necessary to deliberate, as Dr. Bond said, all night tonight, okay? Okay, let's open it up to audience of citizens. Mr. Anderson. And I do plan to hold everyone really in 3 minutes tonight, because we have a lot to do.
I'm really frustrated. I've been trying to give all you folks a fair chance, but this is disgusting. The arrogance of stating before you hear from the audience of citizens how you're going to vote makes a mockery of having an audience of citizens. I hope you are willing to hear objectively that your numbers are wrong and the children do not fit, and nobody has really done the math apparently. In B1, you may start with 900 children, but if you allocate a fair proportion of the 245 children who are projected on the PEL guidelines, you get to 971. That is over the stated capacity of that school, because I count 71 more kids out of the projected expansion in the PEL study, making it into Pembroke. I also hope you have accounted for the fact that by shuffling the Pembroke boundaries, you have now pushed the entire growth area of Montgomery Township into Pembroke. And as a result, you don't just have 125 housing starts in Pembroke now. I know of 400 building lots just in the lower southeast corner of Montgomery Township. They can't possibly be as low as 125. You also, even if you just go by this plan, have 95% capacity in Pembroke, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is the only school that gets its capacity by way of modular units, whereas you're at 87% in Penfield and only 84% capacity in Pendale. So if you were trying to come up with a plan that screws Montgomery Township, you could not have done better than this.
This is on the subject, but it's a virus I want to talk about. You used the unpaid labor of the committee and the paid labor of your employees. I don't know what that totals, but that has been an expenditure. Tonight, continuing a trend that I've seen with a few board members, a terrific workload was put on an administrator, if it's taken seriously word for word, that really only asked the administrator to say what the board has done over the past 4 years, and what's just happened publicly. Now, again, the question is this good use of money? The board members, this is not everybody, it's not the majority, but it's happened, and I will be glad to talk to the people I'm thinking about if I'm going to dig them out. But I'd rather keep it impersonal. But would you please be a little more careful with the way you spend your money?
Thank you. Next. Well, you better get your, okay, ma'am. I just about ended the audience of citizens. Just no one put their hands up.
My name is Debbie Raskob. I'm from Talminson Township. I was on this committee, and I have to agree that what's the point of having these committees if you're going to, after the fact, have a new starting point? One of the things that you're not looking at in the B1 plan with Pembroke is the piece of property that this district owns, that the second high school that's all going to be built. If you sell that piece of property, the housing starts in Pembroke are going to more than double. And this gentleman was right, that these housing starts that are listed on the one map for the Pembroke area are based on the committee's recommendation, not Plan B1. So there's that 125 is way off base. One of our considerations was putting the biggest growth area in Montgomery Township in Pendale, because that's the biggest school that can handle the most growth, in anticipation that that piece of property was going to be sold. Some of the housing starts that are looked at in Penfield, that you said that's a consideration. A lot of that are high-price, expensive apartment buildings that are supposedly being built across from Walton Farm. I don't think that number of housing starts is going to equal the same number of students as maybe single-family homes that are in some of the other areas. I just think the numbers in Plan B, which you've totally scrapped anyway, the elementary consideration about the elementary boundaries, Mr. Cummins brought up Inglewood. let's be realistic. These elementary boundaries are not going to last to the year 2000. We already have most of our elementary schools at capacity. It's not going to work with new housing starts in most of these schools, so realistically, why look at elementary schools at this point? It's just not realistic, and part of the problem with Inglewood being split so many ways is probably based on the elementary boundaries that exist now that were ludicrous, taking specific neighborhoods that complained the most and got boundaries changed when they were doing the original elementary school boundaries. You know, my kids are going to Penndale or Penfield regardless of any of these plans, but I just think in the interest of transportation and the issues that we looked at on this committee, you know, your numbers are just way off base. Pembroke is going to be over capacity before the year 2000, and, you know, there's just no way you can get around that.
Well, do we want to bring her back up?
Well, I just wanted to, just a point of clarification. Did I hear her correctly when she said that the committee made their recommendation for MAP A to us, taking into consideration that this board was going to sell the Keenest Road property? Is that what you said?
Well, I'm saying that piece that you decided not to build a second high school, that property exists, and you've got to be realistic that if you decide to sell that piece of property, houses are going to be built.
Thank you.
Okay, that was not a consideration of the committee.
Thank you.
I misunderstood.
Point of light.
Thank you. Sir?
Hello, I'm H. Bruce Gordon. I live in the Stone Ridge development in Montgomery Township. My children currently are in kindergarten and second grade at Montgomery Elementary School. I'm concerned that this board, having started a committee, chooses then to ignore it, where the input from that committee was the attendees or the home and school presidents and so on of the individual elementary schools. You folks were elected by the population. I would like you to start acting as if you represent the population instead of your own well-being and your own re-election plans in the coming years. If it were all possible, I'd certainly like to start a recall petition on a lot of your seats.
Jenny Collins, Tom Ensign. I find this real hard to do because a lot of the people that I agree with are on a different side from what I'm going to say. Back to elementary boundaries, this is what Inglewood looked like when the committee planned Inglewood. Right. Then it changed to this, when this neighborhood didn't want to go to this little school, and this neighborhood didn't want to go to this old little school, and they made it look like this. Then, an even further neighborhood, this one said, we don't want to go to Inglewood, and Inglewood looks like this. So that's a whole other story, and I was really disgusted with that. My problem with Plan A with the committee is that it takes Inglewood, little old Inglewood again, and puts it in 3 different schools, some to Penndale, some to Penfield, some to Pembroke. It also takes Tolmenson, which is the community I live in, and it puts it in 3 different schools. So whether it's Plan A, B, or B1, I'd like to see Tolmenson and or Inglewood treated better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, in the back? Sure.
My name is Debbie Collington. I live in Montgomery Township. I can support either A or B. That's not a problem. I can't support B. I can support A or B1. I cannot support B. I live on the little part of the map which goes to Bridle Path, which we're going to be at capacity next year. Right. I didn't agree with the way it was divided for the elementary because you broke up the neighborhood. Right. On Plan B, I have a cousin who lives on Valley Forge Road and Sunnytown Road who have children the same ages as mine. They're best of friends. They will be going to the middle school together. But yet, we will not be going 5 blocks away if it's Plan B. Now, from what I heard, Plan B doesn't seem to be going. However, either one is fine. Just keep the neighborhoods together by major roads. I know that people are trying to say this school and that school, let's try to keep the elementary schools together. But who's to say 2 years down the road when Bridle Path is to capacity or over capacity, we will be going there? Let's think of where you're going. Plus the transportation. I drive a school bus with Ryder. It takes too long to get from Sumney Town Road to the other side of the district. You have to think about the bus driving. Get on a bus at 7 o'clock in the morning and sit in that traffic and figure out what is going on. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I think there was another hand back. Yes, ma'am? Nancy.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Alfred-Sis, and I live in Towmenson Township. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. First of all, the committee did in fact look at all the plans from the 1993 redistricting before the maps before the Penndale was just a 9th grade building, and unanimously voted against any of those maps because they no longer met the criteria that the committee had established as being important for redistricting. Among those was the fact that when those maps were drawn up, we thought there would be a second high school. My main concern with B1 is the housing starts. You have 450 housing starts right now going to Penndale. What you don't have broken down on B1 is that those 450 housing starts, the majority of them would go to Pembroke, and in the year 2000 you're going to have a building with a student population of 900 before any of those houses become reality. I would venture to say that you're going to be above capacity in Pembroke before 2000 if that's the case. And the other issue that I wanted to clear up from sitting on the committee, Inglewood was definitely represented on that committee. We talked about the fact that there would be people that dislike being it split 3 ways. It was talked about several times, and it was agreed that that's the way it had to be for some people. And as far as splitting Towmenson between 3 middle schools, it's split now between 3 elementary schools, and I see no deleterious effects on any of the students right now. You have to split some of the townships just the way the district is, and the fact that Penndale is a much bigger building right now. That's the way it's been redesigned. So I hope you consider that. B1 is definitely an option, but I'm concerned about those numbers at Pembroke. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
Good evening. I'm Linda Abram from Upper Gwinnett Township. I sat on the committee. It was not all entirely homeschool presidents. There were parents from the elementary schools who were on that committee as well. I am a homeschool president. I'm proud to say that. I think this is an issue of numbers, and what concerns me about B1 has been said before quite eloquently, so I won't stand here for my 3 minutes. But I will say that when you look at B1 and you look at Pembroke and you look at the housing starts that are going to be coming from that area, and those housing starts in fact directly impact upon Gwynnor Elementary School very imminently, it is not going to be a good situation. And I think we're going to revisit this entire scene if we don't look at the committee's plan. I thank Mr. Allen and Mr. Weitz for echoing the concerns of some of the committee members. I understand that you are a committee and absolutely have the right to come up with whatever plan you feel will best serve the community. I hope that that is what you are doing when you are looking at this information, what is going to best serve this community. The committee spent many hours reviewing what the ramifications were for splitting elementary schools, splitting municipalities. I, for one, live in Upper Gwinnett Township, and I play for Montgomery Soccer Association. I think the issue of staying in one's township no longer remains relevant given the complexity of our North Penn community. So I hope when you look at it, we tried to look at those 4 or 5 categories, and each one of them, yes, had very much weight given to them because no one was any greater than the other in merit. They were all very important to us. I support the committee's recommendation. Thank you.
It might help if a few more people who have comments that they could go ahead and get in line. It would might be able to move things along a little bit faster. I saw a few more hands go up.
Hi, my name is Janet Vitus from Tomenton Township, and I myself was also on the committee. I must say, to start off with, as a parent, I went into this committee not as a homeschool president, as a parent. My son will be in 4 schools in 4 years, thanks to you people on the old board. I'm also an Inglewood parent, and I was very torn with Inglewood being affected, and I'm also a Tomenton Township resident, so Tomenton's affected. So I got hit on every basis. But when I sat in on these meetings and I listened to the criteria and what our goal was, I didn't think of my child as number one, and my main concern is I was thinking of North Penn School District and what was best for these kids. And it became a numbers issue and what suits these kids. Yes, Inglewood is affected. However, where I am located in Inglewood and Tomenton, I get flip-flopped when you people feel Inglewood is too crowded. I get flip-flopped to Gwinnett Square. And when Gwinnett Square got too crowded, I got flip-flopped back. So, to look at Inglewood now, if you change in 2 years and because of Jacob Woods coming up in Tomenton and Walton Farm will be too crowded and Inglewood has to get shuffled, these people, you could potentially have Inglewood not being split at all. But it all depends on where elementary boundaries are. So, in my personal opinion, Inglewood boundaries was not a main criteria to do it. Tomenton Township, yes, it's split 3 ways, unfortunately. However, my kids are also active in TYA. And if you want statistics, I can certainly get them for you. We have out-of-township residents coming in for baseball and softball. Our soccer program has 35% out-of-township residents sign up for soccer. So these kids play with everybody in the North Penn School District, not their own township and community. So I support the committee's plan. I just feel we have to look at a numbers game and what's best. And as a parent that has been, my son will now be in 4 years and four consecutive years, 4 different schools, 4 schools in 6 years because he was at Gwinnett Square for a couple years. We got to try to get a stability here, and we have to consider growth. We did that with the committee's plan. We did start with that first plan. I remember seeing it. I also was at some of those meetings when the controversies came up with that, but we did use that as a starting block. We just felt we had directions to go. Thank you.
My name is Debbie Francis. I'm in Upper Gwinnett Township. I'm at Inglewood, and I really appreciate the work that the committee did on this. Unfortunately, I'm on the borderline when the elementary schools have been overcrowded and redistricted. We're right there. We've been moved 3 times. My daughter's in 5th grade. I still have a little bit to go before I get to the middle school. But in my opinion, B1 meets the needs of this neighborhood that's been flip-flopped around repeatedly in every move that they've made. There's the little triangle that got moved several times. When elementary schools were debated 2 years ago, and I just wanted to say I supported B1. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Duffy. I'm from Hatfield Township, and I have children in Penfield. And if I had children going to Pembroke, I would be a little alarmed at the numbers of 900. So I support the committee's report. And as far as the science labs, I think they should all be looked at all 3 schools, and that really shouldn't be a part of our consideration to, map-wise. And I would like to see the school board members keep more in touch with the other school board members that are representing different committees or whatever, such as Bill Allen. I think that he should have gotten some more information beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sandy Ford from Upper Gwinnett Township. Sitting here listening to everybody, audience, paying attention to everybody's thing. Communication, everybody up there sitting, everybody back here sitting, communication's got to be the key. it just appears that there was this map. Mrs. Scher thought that it started here. Dr. Redman thought it started there. Dr. Bond thought it started here. Did anybody really know where it started? Everybody assumed that somebody else thought that it was here. It's got to be communication. You all have to know exactly what you're starting on. Assumption is a very stupid thing to do. You know what assumption makes out of you. I'm sure you've heard it a million times. It's true. We all teach our kids, you don't assume, you have to know. You go by facts. You have to get communication down. You have to get it down between board members, committees, administrators, everything. These administrators shouldn't be doing anything till they're absolutely sure that they know what this board intends for them to do. And I totally agree. If I was on this committee, yes, I would be flipping mad. I would be like very, very upset because you know what? It seems that they did waste your time. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was intentional on a board member's part, a committee person's part, administrator's part. It's communication. Something happened here. You better think about what happened so it doesn't happen again. Time is very, very valuable. My next thing that really got me the hottest was the arrogance of Mr. White and Mr. Allen. Can't believe you're sitting up here acting so nasty and everything else. If you're that unhappy being board members, I think you ought to resign. It's about time that you ought to learn how to just put politics aside and old boards and everything else. You're no longer a member of the old boards. All of you are adults. You all need to get along together. Put your differences aside. You're all very, very intelligent people. Come to a common ground. You came to 5-4 votes, 4-4 votes lots of times before. You can come to agreements on things. It just takes a little work and a lot of communication.
My name is Eileen Crawford. I live in Upper Gwynedd. My concern is about the process and the precedent that you all seem so gleeful in setting for this community. I have a question, and I mean it with all due respect to Mr. Clemens. When you reviewed the plan that was submitted by the committee and you found concerns, and I think the concern about Englewood being split in 3 is a legitimate concern, why didn't you pick up the phone and call Janet Vitus, who is the president of your child's home and school, who lives in Towamencin, and who served on the committee, and say, Janet, I have some questions. Could you explain to me, what the committee's thought was on this? If not, Mrs. Vitus, why didn't you convey your concerns directly back to the committee so that the committee could take them into consideration and make an adjustment, as opposed to just drawing your own map?
If you want an answer,
I do. No, seriously, I do want an answer.
I talked to Mrs. Vitus twice, ma'am. Now, would you continue your comments, please?
Okay. Why didn't you? Was Mrs. Vitus asked to convey that information back to the committee and for the committee to make adjustments?
I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the meeting, ma'am, but I told you that at the time that the plan came out, I didn't get it till the 11th hour, ma'am, to be quite frank.
You just said at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Clemens, that this was not done at the 11th hour. You said that you made a deliberate attempt to work with everyone. You went out of your way to say that.
Yes, I did, ma'am. I did, and I did go out of my way to work with everyone. Now, would you continue your questions and comments?
You haven't answered my question,
Mr.
sir.
Clemens, perhaps if
You
it
haven't
would
answered the
give more
question.
credibility.
Mrs.
Right after
Scher,
the plan.
No, Mrs. Scher, this is my turn.
We met with Dr. Bond.
Mrs. Scher, this is my turn. What question didn't I answer, ma'am?
You did not answer why you did not take your concerns directly back to the committee and ask the committee to rework them in a plan.
Ma'am, I need to correct you and tell you that I went directly to Dr. Bose and asked him who would be the person to go right to with my concerns to get them addressed the quickest. And he directed me to Dr. Bond. Now, would you continue on with your comments?
I think my comments speak for themselves. I think that you all are enjoying this. I think you find it entertaining, and I think it's a sad precedent that we're setting for our community to show such disrespect for those who are serving, that you have so little regard for their opinion that you won't even consider, talking to them further. So I am disappointed, but, we all know who has the votes. So you guys will do what you want.
That's correct, ma'am.
My name is Chuck Hammond. I'm from Montgomery Township. I've sat here, listened to the cute innuendos and what have you this evening. Quite honestly, committees, I believe, are formed to give their best opinion of which direction we should take. I've looked at the maps. The Penfield has not changed B1, A, what have you. There are two lines, I guess, that have changed on the maps. One in the Montgomery Township, putting part of the people into Penndale versus Pembroke, and another map that went up on the other side, separating the part, I guess in the center of it is called Gwinnett Square. From the standpoint of numbers, and we always seem to get in these sessions with numbers, where did these numbers on the back of the sheets come from? Did Mr. Clemens make these up himself?
No.
Were these from Mr. Bond? Where did these numbers on the back come
The
from?
numbers on the back of the sheet represent straight line projection, means they represent the students that we have in those grades currently.
Based on the redistricting or the drawing of these maps, the students that would attend Pembroke versus
Yes.
what would have attended
Yes.
Penndale? Thank you.
We drew a line and we said, how many students are in this class in this area?
Okay. I have lived in Montgomery Township also in and around for about 23 years now. I've seen almost every piece of open space in Montgomery Township disappear due to housing. I can't possibly see where there can be that much of a tremendous influx of school students coming from that area. Now there's no more place to put a house. I'm wrong. Okay, I live there. I've seen everything built up around this one end of the township from Stone Ridge out to County Line Road, that there's nothing left there anymore. If you can find a place to put a house, feel free. But I, quite honestly, based on what I see on these maps, I support B1 also. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no hands, no more hands, this concludes our audience of citizens for this subject. Now, we need to,
Mr. Clemens, before we move
well,
on.
sure, we can come around. Do you have a question?
No, I just want to make one thing perfectly clear tonight. It's becoming increasingly interesting to me as we move through this progress, week to week, month to month, that the same individuals are approaching the podium and criticizing this new board for taking the initiative to come to a compromise understanding when we are being approached by members of the community with concerns made by committee recommendations. And I would like to remind the members of this audience that some of you were sitting here, some of you served, and I would like to remind you on the task force committee for the second high school. And you were here the evening that Dr. Elko pulled out of his hat his revision to that committee's recommendation to downsize the second high school from 2,200 students to 1,600. Not one person got up and criticized, either from the task force, got up and criticized that board or that superintendent for that change of venue. And I would appreciate it very much, as a new board member, for a little bit of understanding and a little bit of tolerance on our political opponents that are here when you approach this podium. Thank you very much.
Okay, unless there are no other comments, I'd like to bring this issue close, so we can move on. The recommendation is to recommend adoption of the middle school boundaries as proposed by the committee effective September 1996.
Recommend by the committee, no consensus for that one.
Is there a consensus for
We
that
need a different
recommendation?
plan.
I don't- No, what was proposed by the committee. I don't sense that there is consensus.
Tom, no, the agenda as written is designed by the board.
Right.
I mean, we certainly have the venue over the
Right.
phraseology of the motion.
Right. So I would recommend it to say the recommend adoption of the middle school boundaries as proposed as listed as map B1.
Are you looking for a motion?
I'm just looking for a consensus to get that on for the action meeting that night. For B1, poll the board. B1, you support B1?
Well, consensus for the item on the agenda, yes.
Okay, consensus for the item on the agenda to approve B1. Mr. Allen?
Well, I want it on the agenda.
You want it on the agenda,
No, that's all we can
right?
say. We want
That's
it on
all
the
we'll say
agenda.
for now,
on the
right. But
agenda.
B1 will appear on the agenda.
Anyone.
Well, it's fine.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll move on. Oh, let's see, where are we?
Program of studies.
Okay, middle school program of studies. Turn it over back to Dr. Bond.
Mr. Clemens, may I get just a couple minutes to refocus, please? Because
Sure.
I just need a couple minutes.
That's unbelievable.
Take a break.
Okay?
We'll break.
5 minutes.
Is it a good time to change the paper, or is it too early? Okay, we'll take a 3-4 minute break, we'll change the tape, and we'll reconvene. Quiet, please, from the audience. Okay, we're going to move on, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Bond. I do believe, though, that Dr. Bond has requested that we change our format a little bit, that perhaps we discuss or revisit team teaching and then move into the program of studies. So, in saying that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. What I'd like to do is recap very briefly where we left off last week and see if I can clear up a few items. We're talking about teaming, and there's been some confusion about teaming and team teaching. We're talking about teaming, which is different, and that has been included in the packet. I should say that since we met last, I need to acknowledge that several members of this board have called me, have spoken with me in person, and several members of this board have visited middle schools to see firsthand what teaming is. And I just want you to know that the administrators in that school and the teachers in that school made it very clear to me that you were there, that you asked a lot of questions, that you saw a lot of things, and that they were very, very pleased to have you visit. So to those of you who did that, on behalf of the middle school folks, we say thank you. When we left this last time, we had said we're requesting that we have teaming in 7th and 8th grade, and that it include honors for September 96, 97. We also said that we would do this without any additional monies for teaming, and that if we came forward with monies, it would be my charge to document that it was based on something other than teaming, primarily additional students that are enrolled. We were asked about assessment tools. I tell you that we've looked for assessment tools, and we will continue to do that. But I cannot say to you tonight that we have a tool in place, because it takes more study than we've had an opportunity to come up with between the last meeting and this one. We believe very strongly that we need to assess what we do regardless as to what it is. If it's in place, we need to assess it. But additionally, I feel strongly that we need goals, objectives that are measurable against which we can weigh our accomplishments. In this district, we have a Goal 1 plan. The Goal 1 is not updated enough to include some of the things that should be included in terms of teaming. So those are things that we need to do. We need to establish criteria, we need to measure it, and we need to report out the measurement. Those things were planned to take place when teaming went into effect. We have not had in this district for 3 years days and opportunities for folks to get together to do that because of the snow, because of the work stoppage, and the snow again. We're working on a way to do that this year regardless as to whether, because we can't wait any longer to have those things happen. And I think that's a legitimate request on your part. We answered, I think, a number of questions in writing. I'm not sure, as far as the board's concerned, what questions we haven't answered yet. And if there's anything else that we can say to help clarify things for you, I'd like to do that at this time.
Okay, let's try something different this time. Let's take a question from this side, then we'll come over to this side. All right, break it up a little bit. Mrs. Krieger.
Okay. Dr. Bond, I did visit Pembroke Middle School.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
I did visit Pembroke Middle School.
Right.
I had a very eventful day. I arrived at 8 a.m. and left at 3 p.m. I was very tired at the end of the day. However, one thing became very clear to me on that visit, and that was provided first and foremost to me by the breakdown by class and by team of the individual classes. And it became very clear that we are not in compliance with our 1990 classroom size guidelines. As a result of that, and I think it's incumbent upon me as a board member to make very public that we are not in compliance with those guidelines. In fact, we are over. So it would be my recommendation to this board and to the administrators to immediately begin a revision of those 1990 classroom guidelines so that this community is fully aware that those classroom sizes have increased significantly from the guidelines. I do not want to be blamed as a board member if we decide to keep team teaching, that was the reason why classroom size was increased, okay? Because we're in our second year of team teaching, and I think that needs to be made very public. Also, the only other clarification that I need was in regards to your response about the financial and contractual benefits to the district with team teaching. In your breakdown between I'm going to try to find that document, where you showed us the sampling of the middle school teaching assignments.
Yes.
With and without teaming. It's very clear here that teachers not on a team, in a typical schedule without a team, that they may be given 6 periods to teach a day. Maybe. I think I alluded to Ms. Mingle back in January. Was it something that we negotiated or was it required? Mr. Schmidt's response to me was, no, it's not required, that I had been misinformed. But then in reading your document here, it's something that's very objective and subjective in that if it were required without teaming, that a teacher could be given a 6th period to instruct. However, under teaming, the core subject teachers only teach 5 periods a day.
That's correct.
So my question is, knowing what our future enrollment is going to be coming into the middle school level and how it's going to increase, how, if you're not going to increase class size or give teachers more periods to teach a day, are we going to be able to accommodate the growth?
Mrs. Krieger, my comments relative to money was based on the fact that the teachers would be teaching the same periods they're teaching now. It's very clear that if teachers teach 6 assignments, you need fewer teachers on a step. But my preface was that the teachers would be teaching the same assignments that they're teaching now at the middle school, not more. So if in fact you say to me, if we don't have teaming, do we hire fewer teachers in the future? The answer to that is probably yes. Because you give them 6 assignments, you need fewer teachers. But you can't, but that means we won't have teaming.
Okay, so the reality, though, is that should this board decide to keep team teaching, and eventually with the growth that we're intending to see at the middle school level, it will be a recommendation somewhere in the future to hire more teachers at the middle school level
That is
to
correct.
accommodate the
That is
growth.
correct.
Okay, I just wanted that made as a point of clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, come to this side.
From the last board meeting, I provided everyone a yellow piece of paper. Dr. Vaughn has it. I spoke to him earlier, and so these are areas that I do like clarified regarding the team teaching. We talked about the goals, and I heard him assure the board basically that there would be an establishment for the goals of the teaming program, and general objectives. Most of these are dealing more with the students themselves. I'll just read them. I don't know, Juan, I'll pause to see if you want to answer them or if we want to wait for a final answer. I'd like to know what objective criteria has been established to define each of the ability groups within a team. Do we have written guidelines? with criteria?
I don't know.
Do you-
The answer is yes, they say.
Okay, where would I find them?
Where do we find it? We can have them tomorrow.
That defines what each of the ability groups are?
Yes.
Okay. And the designated student ability baseline that you use to determine each student's placement.
The answer is yes.
Do you know what that is? In other words, if you're taking students and they're being placed into the groups, the ability groups, what is the assessment of that student's abilities? What is your baseline in assessing that student to figure out how he's classified because of all the grouping of those different disciplines?
But recognize that this question would be a question that we'd ask whether we're teaming or not, because the same criteria is used to put these youngsters into those classes, whether we're teaming or not.
Well,
so this specific question has to do with how we get youngsters into their classes, and that's not different when we're teaming.
But Dr. Vaughn, when I go through a program of studies with the individualized scheduling, I got to choose specifically a child's math group,
Okay.
a child's English group, my child's
Okay.
science level.
Right.
What I'm looking for is what out of all those disciplines that do end up grouped together is your
Okay.
ruler.
That's a question that we've addressed, and what we've said is that we will schedule those youngsters into the groups that fits their needs. In other words, and I can't promise this 100% because it deals with so many parameters. When you start scheduling these youngsters, you could end up with 10 extra students. If you end up with 10 extra students, you don't create another group. Somehow you have to put them in with the students you already have. Now our hope is, and I'll tell you, I won't promise this, but our hope is that if a youngster should be in 5.0 for English and social studies and 6.0 for two things, that we will be able to do that. If a youngster should be in 4.0 for math and science and 5.0 for English and social studies, we're going to try to do that. But if I sat here and told you that we would be able to do that for 100% of the students, whether we're teaming or not, it would be inaccurate, and I won't give you inaccuracies. But that's our hope, to do exactly what you're saying. We have baseline criteria for what a 6.0 student should be, what a 5.0 student, what a 4.0 student is based on assessments that are national assessments. It's both teacher recommendation, it's based on the grades, it's based on parental request, it's based on any number of things. And we take a look and we say Juan Bond is 6.0 in math, and Juan Bond is 6.0 in science. And I'm glad to be able to do this tonight because the first time that I've been 6.0 in those two categories. Besides, this group needed to laugh. So we take those 6.0s, and then they say Juan Bond is 5.0 based on the criteria that's established in social studies and English. So I get on teams based on that. That's what we're going to try to do. I can't promise it'll work because of the numbers, and we've got to deal with that as we get to it.
But has that been happening? And as you review, is there a written formula though? Because I wondered, do some and through whatever the different groups, whoever's putting the groups together, as they're coming in, as they're formulating the groups, are some just judging on reading skill? I mean, I wondered what is your priority?
They're saying that we do that now and that we can get you the criteria that we use. I don't know what it is.
Okay, I'd just like to see that there is written criteria. If it isn't, that it would be developed.
We will get it, and if it isn't, we will develop it.
And that we have objectives.
It's written. No, we have it. We will get it to you.
Okay, we have an assessment plan for the program. Do we have established an objective student assessment process?
We have the assessment process that we use, is assessment that are district criteria. We have no specific assessment that's just for students that are teaming. And that's what we're working on, that's what we're researching, that's what I'm talking with the folks at Lehigh about, creating a way to specifically assess the teaming students, not the entire, the PSSA or the whatever names or acronyms they use.
So you do feel confident, though, if we move forward with the continuation of teaming,
that we will
be able to
tool.
Put this in place,
Absolutely.
An assessment tool that's similar, because 6.0 is, they have an IEP process.
Right.
And then, but I wondered for the 4.0 and the 5.0, what is there to help our staff follow through with that in a consistent way?
We have to do that for 6.0s too that are not gifted. All
Okay.
6, because we're putting honors back there, so we have to do it for 4.0, 5.0, and 6.0s, because the only IEPs are for the 6.0 gifted students.
Right.
Right.
Right, it may not be exactly an IEP process, but there should be something as
Right.
formal as that that's outlined for everyone to use so that everyone's working from a
Agreed.
same chart as they're grouping
And
from
every
school to
school.
school. From school to school, from grade to grade, team to team,
I agree.
and the evaluation of their progress.
I agree.
Because I do worry that if a child's easily put in one team, that you kind of just follow through year after year. It seems easier and it's, maybe a little bit more security.
Okay, the other thing, we use the child study teams for that too. The teachers, once youngsters are placed, if there's a need to report a youngster to child study team for further review, we do that. Additionally, the time that we're talking about here, which precludes them from doing the 6th assignment, is used to talk about those youngsters academically and socially. So there are movements that can be made during the course of the year as well.
But is there something that says there must be this process for each of these students prior to the beginning the next year, somewhere in between? Is there something that absolutely puts out these directives?
No.
So that
No.
some may be evaluated and some may not?
No. Yes, you're right. We evaluate those that based on their performances or parental requests need to be evaluated. There is no formal document that says that during the course of the year, this, and this would happen.
Could we have that developed?
We will
as a part of these?
look at developing all of these things that we're talking about.
Okay. And then until recently, district administrators claimed that the honors level was maintained within the current teaming structure. We're now visiting it and saying that we will return and reinstate an honors level. What specific changes will be made to the 1996-97 program of studies that will incorporate a team teaching process and to reinstate the honors level?
For the program of studies will stay as this board had voted on it before, and we will simply include in it a listing of honors courses that the youngsters may opt into. So the only change in the 9th grade program, the 7th and 8th grade program of studies is the addition of honors course. Teaming is in there now. 4 and 5.0 are in there now. Gifted is in there now. We put 6.0 in, and that takes care of the question on program of studies. That's all I'm asking for program of studies.
Okay, so it may not be, it won't be visible in the levels, the team levels, but it will be visible in the course of studies.
It will be visible in the program of studies.
Okay, will this change impact the academic effectiveness or the financial needs of team teaching?
It will change the academic effectiveness, we hope, but it won't change the finances.
Okay. Mrs. Krieger addressed the next one, which was regarding the elimination of the district's ability to schedule for 6 periods.
Right.
And I believe it would be considered a financial consequence, and even immediately without growth, because if in fact we were to go in that direction, we would have 1 additional period per employee given if the students were requiring it. Then I guess it comes down to the team planning period, which has to do with the assessment and how it's being used.
That's correct.
Do we have the staff guidelines or directives that ensure that that team planning period is being used by each of the team groups?
Yes. And not only that, we have documentation in terms of what happens during that period. We keep a, what do we call it? We keep a log, thank you.
Okay.
We keep a log to say exactly what happens. In all of the areas throughout the schools where we have that planning period, logs are kept that says what happens during that time. You folks are welcome to peruse that anytime you'd like.
Well, I've been through the process. I have a child that's been involved in teaming. Even prior to the board's change, I'd say I thought it was nice to be able to have that group discussions that were involved regarding my child and how he was doing. But I just wondered, is there something, because there's also more teachers, just as there's some students who have been involved in teaming longer, we also have some teachers who are very new to the team process. And I wondered if there was something that set out that it would be used for multidisciplinary curriculum planning and student tutoring and student assessments.
Yes, that is right.
Okay, I appreciate it. I think that if you address some of the concerns regarding the monitoring of the program as well as the student placement area, I would have to be inclined to support the continuation of it, and particularly with keeping in mind that we're in a strategic planning process. And while I may not have, I would not have probably supported this change coming in as of the last year's vote, there is a price to be paid in retooling and regearing and switching over to curriculum. And in the back of my mind, I keep thinking that come November, when the strategic plan is brought forward, we could very well be moving toward a change in our curriculum, be it block instruction or be it a modified curriculum delivery. Whatever that might be, I would hate to see us switch over at this point, only to have another change in the wings for our grade levels in the following year. I'd also just close with that if in fact this board's direction is to really make just basic administrative modification, ask for administrative modifications, if it's only dealing with the restoration and design of the course levels, such as with the honors program, we are not, officially, that's not really a change in curriculum. We never voted honors out. There was no motion on that. We wouldn't need a vote in order to bring it in or to continue with the method of instruction that already exists. If that's the conclusion through tonight's discussion, then I'd like to see us bring closure tonight and bring to the board's attention that there's really no compelling reason for a vote.
Okay.
Okay? That's it. Thank you.
Okay, let's come back over here. Ms. May?
Okay. Dr. Bond, I don't have any questions for you. I just have some points I'd like to make and some stipulations I would need before I could give my vote to this, which I am inclined to do, if those stipulations are met. First of all, I think some of the bad beating team teaching may have received was due to the fact that when it came in, it did not come in under the best display. It did not come in positively, and for whatever reason, fact or fiction, honors was removed at the same time, and that was bad. And anybody a part of that should be ashamed of themselves. That is what we're supposed to be about, acceleration, not accommodation. And when honors were removed, it cast a pall over the team teaching. Maybe that's unfair, maybe you're not responsible, but I know I'm not, okay? And I know this board is not, so we'll move on from here. I don't want to see team teaching in the 7 and 8 be used to ratchet up into 9th through 12th. I see 9th through 12th as freshmen through senior years, and that, you don't have team teaching when you go off to college. You buck up, ability group, you move on, but that I understand 7 and 8 is a special group of kids. The age group is tough. I have a child in that group. I did not visit any of the buildings. I had opportunity to meet with principals and teachers. 3 days of strategic planning around here gave me ample opportunity to get questions answered. And my macho 14-year-old asked me to please not come to school and visit. He says I have strange clothing. Can you imagine that? Anyway, I didn't visit and go into the classroom because my son asked me not to. But I agree with the arguments in case building that has been done, that this is a special age group. And I see the need for a smaller community and need for control. I think particularly Miller and Feely have an incredible grip on their school, Pembroke, but I think a lot of that may not be due to their muscular structure, but because there is team teaching in place and they get more help in policing those students. I also think that Barb Delp from the Reporter is after your job because she did a very fine job writing
She's after my job?
I think so.
Yay. That's easy. Do you have any more good news for me now?
I'm not done with my stipulation, but she did, I think, a very good job as, as a parent, a community volunteer, writing up, I think, a nice article on behalf of team teaching, and you should probably thank her. It certainly has helped build your case. That's one. Two. No, I'm not done, Mr. Bond, Dr. Bond. We're holding you to the budget because you said team teaching would not cause more teachers, that in and of itself would not cause more teachers. I trust you with those statements, and Dr. Bose heard you, and so
We're going to hold you to that, and that be part of the stipulation. Also, the need for documentation in the following areas. You talked about the journal. I don't want to go through that journal, but I would like to see some sort of annual review of teachers, how many students were seen, some sort of synopsis of who benefited from that sixth period, and hopefully they were all students and not teachers. Actual steps taken for building principals to assure us that children are the beneficiary of that sixth period assignment and not teachers. I do worry that as sixth period assignments are pushed, as you promised, in the high school, that they don't feel jaded because 7 and 8 teachers now have this arrangement. And certainly don't want to hear about it come negotiation time. Testing or data collection efforts to measure success, failure, growth, or stagnation. If we can start that. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, and there's no real empirical data. And that's another thing, you know, that we heard for 3 days from teachers, from parents, as we claim excellence, we claim being a wonderful school district, but we have no hard copy, real hard copy to prove that we are, in fact, doing more than spreading hearsay. So I'd like to see more supportive measurements that we can review from time to time. Too many times we've made changes without clear and forthcoming rationale to do so. Bringing teaming in was not done the right way. We didn't show a real need to change. Worse than that, we embrace changes, new programs, new efforts, and then try and back into a funding plan. And I don't think this board's going to put up with that anymore, where we take on something and then try and figure out how to pay for it later. Continue the increased sixth period assignments in the high school, and may we come back next year and review this. Not as a matter of whether we keep it or not, but how well are we doing. So if these stipulations can be met, honors being brought back, that's not even up for discussion. I think there's enough board members here that will just be an edict. Then I can vote for it next Thursday.
There's the one thing that you said that causes me concern is relative to teaming at the high school. You know.
I know Tech Prep.
Okay.
They're special, and they're a special situation. I
Okay.
understand.
Okay.
That's a need that they have, and it's proper.
That's fine.
As 7 and 8 has a need.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll come back over to this side. Any more questions, Ms. Magel?
No, thank you, all of you. Thank
Okay.
Principal Miller for all the help that she has given answering my questions privately from time to time.
John?
Yeah, I just want to comment. I have a son in teen teaching in the 8th grade, and as I mentioned before, and both my wife and I are pleased with it. I mean, it's working for him. Different conferences we've had with the teachers and communication with the teachers. I have no problem with it. The only thing I stated previously was bringing honors back and some way to measure it, and you indicated you're going to do that. So, I just thank you for answering my questions and through the different information and so forth. But if those things are done, I definitely will support it. And I appreciate your hard work, Dr. Bond, in presenting this.
Thank you. Okay. David, Pat? David?
Just like to ask you one question that you can answer with a professional opinion. Ron, you or Judy. Many people have, we've been talking about this from the teacher's perspective. I'd like to ask a question from the student's perspective. Again, your professional opinions. Is team teaching the most effective way we have today to educate our students and meet their general needs?
In 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th grade.
I qualify that by saying yes in 7th and 8th grade.
That's why I put it that way.
Yes.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Allen or Mr. Hill? Mr. Allen.
Thank you. I visited both middle schools, and I attended 2 team teaching meetings. One, I will say, unannounced, in that I asked Mr. Twyford if I could visit a meeting at some time, and he said, well, there's one in about 5 minutes. Can you do it now? I said, great. So I visited the team meeting, and I learned a lot from it, and there's a lot that I learned that what team teaching isn't. It's not a method of teaching, in my estimation, and also from my follow-up of conversations with Mr. Twyford and Mrs. Miller. It's a method of organization of the students within the school. We are not changing textbooks. We're still having heterogeneous groupings. We're still giving report cards. We're still doing everything the same with a few different enhancements. What I learned from watching these people in the meeting, and if I could give an example, a particular student was showing a noted problem in a particular class, discipline problem, and as the one teacher brought this up about the student, the other teacher said, yes, I've noticed this change also. One of the teachers said, well, there's a problem at home. The next thing you know, there's a conference with the parent about this student, and if these teachers didn't get together for this team teaching meeting, they would have I'm afraid it would have just got ignored, because they would have looked at this student as, well, it's just a problem in my class. Let it go. But when they all got together, they realized there's something wrong here. A teacher made a phone call to the parent. A problem was solved before it got bigger. Another case in point was a student who was showing a change in behavior throughout the day, but the teacher at the end of the day said, this particular student is really a problem. And the teacher at the beginning said, I don't see this problem. And as the teachers went through the day, they realized it was a medication problem. Called the parent, get the medication adjusted. Two good examples of what wouldn't have been found if we didn't have these teachers all teaching the same students and getting together and talking about them. There's an interdisciplinary project going on in one of the schools. All 4 major teachers are involved with this same project. They couldn't do that if they weren't having the same students all the time. They ask about, one of the questions that's brought up is levels. You can change a level within a team. You can have a student that's having a problem in a level 5 math and switch him with an English class within your team. So what I'm saying is, I don't see, it's not how we're delivering education. It's how we're treating the students. They're getting to know the students. The students travel within a confined area of the big school. They're with each other all day. The teachers know them, the kids know them. And I have to believe it's something that is for the benefit of these 13, 14, 15-year-old kids that have a crisis every day in their life when they can't find the right outfit to wear. So if we can get them down to a smaller group, I have to believe we're helping them. And as far as measuring it, I don't know how you measure something like this. This is not something that is definitely definable and measurable. It's something that you have to experience to understand what it does. But I have asked anybody, or excuse me, I have asked everybody that I've dealt with. I met with 2 teams, which is 8 or 9 teachers, and the 2 principals, and I have said, what is the downside of it? And the only thing I heard was it's a little harder to schedule the kids in the fall, but it's not a big deal. So I'm in favor of it, and I see a big value. What I'm concerned is that people are expecting to get a report of measurable gains that we get from this, and I'm not sure we can do that. Thank you.
Okay, back over to this side.
My turn. Mr. Clemens and I were also attendees at one of the middle schools. We went last week. Mr. Chair, I thank you for your list, and you left one thing off. I think we should definitely take a look at this again and review this in July and August as you suggested.
Oh, that part, yes.
My concern is this, Dr. Vaughn. You said that you're working with the people at Lehigh to look for assessments and so forth. Do you have any idea, when that might be coming forth? I mean, we're talking about some of these things we're talking about now. Are we talking about implementing them next school year? Are we going to have them in place before this year is out?
My hope is that we can take a look at what's out there and put something in place so that we can begin measuring with not only next year's class, but with the classes that have currently been through. Depends on the tool, but my hope is that we can do some of both next year and the past.
So hopefully by July or August, if we ask the same question, we should have something
I will be
concrete.
able, I will have a better feel for what we can do by July or
Okay.
August, yes.
Also, when we met with Principal Jeff, I had asked a question about a comparison in grades as to when a child goes from 7th and 8th grade, maybe we should call them students, they're adolescents at that age, let's upgrade them and call them students and not children. When they go from 7th and 8th grade, the team teaching concept, and they go into 9th grade, to high school, I'd ask for comparison as to, are they doing better, are they doing worse, do we have anything in place?
We do not.
Do you think we should address that?
Yes.
Thank you. And second, the last thing I have is, I too got some phone calls from some parents, and I know it's in its infancy and it's only the second year. Two things. One, how are we going to implement honors? And I would appreciate if you said you're going to come forth with some kind of a detailed explanation. If we're going to have to make a decision, we're going to discuss, are we going to vote on curriculum at the next action meeting next week?
Yes.
Well, maybe we should have something before Thursday. Well, we have a meeting scheduled for Thursday
Yeah, we have a
afternoon.
meeting next
I
Thursday.
just absolutely and positively cannot do that. I just can't do it.
Well, then I suggest
Pat,
we do
the
it.
program of studies doesn't restrict you down to that narrow a level. I mean, it's not that,
Well, don't we have a
detailed, so-
game plan as to how we're going to implement honors?
We have a game plan, but understand that we didn't put a lot of time in the implementation of honors. We have ideas of how to do it, but that's a lot of people's time and work, and I didn't want to do that unless we knew that was going to happen. We can implement honors, but to get you by next Thursday, exactly how that will happen, we don't even know the numbers of students that are going to be there. So we don't have all the parameters we need to make this thing happen.
Okay, but it's possible you'll have something by July or August.
Oh, I'll have something long before
That's
July
fine.
and August, but you said next Thursday.
No, I
That's what's-
apologize.
Mrs. Creedy, you have.
I think what I was asking for was the impossible. I know we have to fine tune it. I've gotten some questions from parents, and I'm not going to bring them forth tonight because I think as we go along, it's probably things that we can use to make the system better, to make it better. And that's all that I have.
Let me explain my concern.
Okay.
Depending on the number of students you have on a team, parameters change relative to the makeup of that team. You may have one honors section or two honors sections on a team, or 3 honors and 4 and 2 5s and 1 4. We need to establish how many students are in a school, how many students will be on a team, what the criteria will be used in terms of the honors, and then work that out and get that to you. So I'm not sure I understand the confusion.
Well, I think I'll be able to have you clarify that when we address the program of studies. So I'll hold.
He needs boundaries. He needs boundaries.
Yeah,
He needs boundaries.
He needs boundaries first. Okay, my turn.
Isn't that amazing?
We went around, no, I'm sorry, Don, sorry about that.
I've always forgotten. Listening to the board, and I think the audience, and I think you can hear there's pretty much a consensus for team teaching, because there's been a lot of study, a lot of work, and the definition of what team teaching means in the North Penn School District has been clarified, and I think it's pretty much been agreed that it's the right thing to do. My only point, and I support that also, and based upon, I guess, 4 things, and I guess I list them in the order that I think of their priority, and that could be debated. But when I understood that team teaching we still have traditional teaching and traditional grading, just as we always had, but using team of teachers to accomplish that goal. That was a big clarification for me, and it was an important thing. I have to disagree with Mr. Allen a little bit here in that, well, maybe a lot, I don't know. But the goals, I think everything has to have a goal, and it has to be a measurable goal. And in this particular case, we're in the business of increasing, educating our students, and we've got to determine if teaching is educating our students better or not. So I think that's been restated, but that's one of my criteria is that we have goals and they are measurable and to prove that the plan is working, because we don't, God doesn't measure by how do you know anything is working, so we have to have some measurable goals. Third thing is, it's been restated here, and I strongly believe this, is team teaching in the 7th and 8th grades is great. I don't want to see it go to the 9th or beyond that, 7th and 8th, and you have my support. And the last I have, which is, and I put it in the 4th category because I think that's where it belongs, is the fact that costing is always a problem we're facing with, and as is brought forth here, there'll be no additional cost to the district for team teaching. Based upon those criteria, you have my support for team teaching.
Okay, my turn. I just would like to add, I think it's, Mrs. Krieger brought up a very important point, and I concur with her wholeheartedly about our class size guidelines. And I'd like to emphasize the word guidelines, not mandates or anything like that. It's guidelines. And as a board member, I'd like to see where we are exactly with the guidelines, because we're talking team teaching now, and I definitely realize that there's a consensus here tonight that we should keep team teaching. But in saying that, we have budget time coming up right around the corner, and I really feel that this board, as they look at what the budget's going to look like for next year, will have to take a real hard look at the number of students coming into the middle schools, and be looking at those guidelines very closely, because as Mrs. Krieger stated earlier, we are exceeding those already in some areas, and I think it's imperative that the public know up front that budget time, that this board isn't all of a sudden stretching the limits on the guidelines. So I appreciate what Mrs. Krieger said, and I'd ask that you would get that information to me as soon as possible.
You would recognize also that that's not just a middle school circumstance.
Right. Exactly.
That's not, okay, and I'll make that very clear. That's not just a middle school circumstance.
And I don't think we need a committee to do that.
No. But I think that we had really good, healthy discussion on it. I think the board and the community learned a lot about team teaching, and I agree with what Mrs. Mengel had to say about I read with great interest the article by Barbara Delp, and she really did recap what team teaching is all about, and she did do an excellent job, in my opinion. In saying that, I would support what Mrs. Scher has written at the bottom, and I'll read it. If at the end of tonight's teaming discussion, the board consensus is to maintain team teaching, and then in parentheses, with administrative modifications and restoration of the honors level, there is no compelling reason for further formal board action. Mrs. Scher also goes on to suggest that we bring closure with the expectation of administrative follow-up, and if needed, a progress report can be scheduled for July or August. We talked about all that. So I guess what I'm saying is, why do we need a vote?
Unless
We're not, there's no consensus to pull away teaming, so I believe what we're telling you on is keep team teaching. You've heard our requests, and you've certainly heard our concerns, and I think that you have your directive, and therefore we don't have to wait until next Thursday night for a vote on it, because we're not going to reverse what you're doing. So does anybody have any questions on that?
You're saying it won't be on the agenda?
There's no
I
need.
don't see any reason for it to be on the agenda. Basically, what we're saying is we're keeping team teaching.
Tom, I just have a question. When they brought teaming in, did the board have to vote on it?
Not as for teaming.
It came under program and studies, and it was not delineated. Unless you had a kid in there, you didn't know honors was missing or that team teaching went in.
There's no reason to vote?
No, as a matter of fact, we wouldn't have needed this discussion.
All right, but yes,
for the
it
discussion,
was
for the
long,
fact
and
to bring it out.
it was drawn out, but a lot of good points were brought out.
You know, Tom, I have to say that this was productive for many other things, although I'm sure Juan had plenty of other things to do. Given the fact that we've had the void in our Director of Secondary Ed position, it brought forward the review of the program that was much needed. And I will tell you, my biggest concern has been dealing with how the students are assessed so that there is something to ensure that those students are being appropriately grouped by ability, as well as the formation of the teams and those groups had some sort of designated process, formula, and criteria.
Right.
I think through this, we've gotten some attention back to curriculum, and heaven knows we've been long overdue for a discussion actually related to student instruction. So for that, I don't think it was a waste, and I thank Juan for finding the time to follow up on this.
Thank you. Okay, Juan, you have your marching orders. Now, I do need to ask the audience, I believe that I've stated clearly the board's intention here as to what to do with team teaching, and now in saying that, are there any questions from the audience?
Moving right along.
Okay, ma'am in the front. I would ask that you keep your comments brief. We do have a lot to cover tonight. Dr. Thomas, could you come up along, and anyone else who wants to speak?
My name is Cindy Manis from Tomanson Township, and I'll keep my comments very brief. What I'd like to do is publicly thank this board, first of all, for doing what the community asked you to do, which was basically to go out and find out what was going on in the schools and to try and understand the process of teaming. And I personally appreciate what this board has done. And this, to me, is how a board should operate. You get the facts, you talk to your administrators, you find out what's going on, and then you make decisions. It goes beyond politics, it goes beyond all the rest of it. This is for the benefit of our kids. So I just want to thank you.
Tom, you can give her 3 more minutes.
I'm Judith Thomas from Hatfield Township, and basically I'm going to repeat the same thing. If I came up this far, I will not go back without saying anything, but I felt also that we owe the board a big thank you, not only for voting or coming to a consensus of what the majority of the parents wanted, but for taking your time and really looking at the situation with an open mind. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think, sir, that, ma'am, Linda, you could get in line. Just up that side.
Hello, H. Bruce Gordon again. Keeping with that comment, I do appreciate your taking your time. I know board work is keeps you very busy above and beyond your other jobs. I am sorry to hear that worrying about one's child's embarrassment as to whether or not a parent attends their school is. No, I'm not going to spare you, because if there are other schools you could have attended. There are other schools you could have attended.
I was raised here. Okay, I've been here 40 years.
And have you
seen
seen
the
the
team
team
and
teaching?
don't bring up my child again. I have never dealt with your child in any way, separate and apart. Don't mention my child from there again.
You brought it to our attention that you did not visit one of the schools because of
I did not enter his
embarrassment.
classroom. And if you're up here to chastise me, then why don't you do it out in the parking lot or someplace else? Don't try and humiliate me. What a little man you are.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
attention,
you.
board.
Linda Abram, Upper Gwynedd. Smile. It's a wonderful experience. It's a joy for us to see you work so well together. And honestly, Dr. Baughan, and all the work that all of you have done as administrators and board members, I think there are many of us in the audience who agree that this is the way it should be. And we're all very pleased that teaming is working so well for North Penn, and it is for our children that we are all here working together. So I want to say thank you to all of you who are voting tonight on behalf of continuing this program. Thank you.
Okay, Seeing no more hands, we'll move on. Mrs. Scher had a comment.
Just to say that we are hoping that all the time that was invested will be a new and improved teaming process, you know? I think
wholeheartedly
that
agree.
all of the work isn't just on review, it's actually on refinement. Don't you think, Dr. Vaughn?
Right. Okay. Any other comments? 'Cause we can keep moving along. Juan, it's still your agenda.
Do your best.
I think now we need to move on to program of studies.
Program of studies is, what we like to do with the program of studies is to approve the program of studies as it exists. We would add honors into the program of studies so that all the youngsters had that option. That's the only change that we're asking for in the middle school program of studies.
Is that your report?
That's my report and that's my request.
Okay, I think we start on.
Yeah, it's a quick one, and I'm done.
We start on this side.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll start with Mrs. Krieger.
Okay. Dr. Bond.
He looks.
Okay.
I'm coming over to
I have
some of you.
another
I'm
three
gonna come drink
questions.
whatever you have in that cup.
It is the strongest coffee in the world. I'm going to be up till 2 o'clock.
Serves you
Okay,
right.
so, okay. I just have 3 simple questions.
What kind?
Simple. Why is this board being asked to approve a program of studies that was already approved for the 95-96 school year by the previous board?
Every year we come forward.
I got 3 questions, and they are all
Okay.
related. Where is a proposed 96-97 middle school program of studies with the inclusion of the honors level? And will the board be afforded a comprehensive draft of the 96-97 middle school program of studies before we're asked to vote on it on February the 15th? I am very uncomfortable as a board member approving something that is not. I know that it was the intent of the administrators to bring forward what we have, but I am very uncomfortable approving what is not. As a board member, and more importantly, as a parent, I would like to see the inclusion in draft form attached to this program of studies of how honors is to be included. I think the board has a right to see that, and I think anybody in their right mind sitting up here would also agree with me. Too many things can occur.
You don't trust me.
It's not that I don't trust you, Dr. Bond. I need to know, and I need to have full disclosure as a board member about what is being proposed for next year. I want to assure every parent who has come before boards of the past with concerns about honors being dropped, that honors is there. It will be there when their programs of studies returns home with their children on March the 8th. And I need that as a board member in some draft comprehensive mechanism before this board is asked to vote on the 15th. If that cannot be done, then I would respectfully request a continuance on this program of studies until it can be done.
Mr. President, I would urge the board not continue anymore the debate over the program of studies, which is merely a recapitulation of the current programs of studies plus the return of the honors program. We're at a critical point in time for planning for the 96-97 school year, which includes the participation of the students and their families in course selections and the development of teacher assignments, et cetera, which also obviously is held up by the boundaries decision. So in the interest of economy and efficiency, which I think this board represents, I urge you not to delay any more adopting what we already have, plus perhaps by motion or resolution adding the stipulation that may be the kind of assurance that you need or require that the honors program will be added to the current program of studies and it will be continued for the 96-97 school year. And permit the staff then with the time left to prepare the documents that students and their families will need as course selections and class schedules begin to be developed for the 96-97 school year. I think what Mrs. Krieger is wanting is some guarantee and some assurance that honors will be returned to our offering and that the program of studies is, as it has been represented, the same one that we now offer.
But I'm confused, Dr. Bose, because this program of studies that I'm looking at right here offers two course levelings, 5 and 4. It's my understanding that when honors was here previously, it was leveled at 6.
That's right. And it will be leveled at 6.
So are you saying to me, as a board member, that when the new and approved program of studies goes home with the middle school parents and 6th grade parents on March the 8th, it will include, in writing, the inclusion of the 6th level course?
Yes.
And the leveling?
Yes.
Right, he said that when he answered me.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm saying.
It's on tape.
On
Okay,
TV.
well,
You've
that's
got
fine, it
evidence.
might be on tape, but I'm still very uncomfortable with that, Dr. Bose, as a board member.
I think, Mr. Clemens, what we're going to have to do, since we're being asked to vote on something and approve it without even getting a chance to read it, and I can understand the time frame. I'm not being critical. I understand the time frame. But we're going to have to make some stipulation in a voting procedure or something that was, the way we voted on it.
Mr. Mosey, how about, I'll do, no, I don't
Well,
want
no, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I think to cover us as a board and that we don't have repercussions further down the road.
I can do it. I will get a mock-up of what as long as it's a mock-up.
That's fine.
That's
I will
fine.
get a
Rough draft
mock-up.
is fine.
I'd rather get the mock-up and not have the stipulations. I'll do whatever it takes. I just need this program of studies. I need it in a hurry. It'll become a priority. I'll get a mock-up. I'll show you exactly where it will appear in the program of studies in this mock-up.
I think you have to appreciate where we're coming from. We're being asked to vote and approve on something, we should.
Mr. Mosey, the fact is, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't appreciate the fact that if I say it's going to be there, there's a question
I have
about
no
that.
problem about that.
Dr. Bond, will it be a problem for a mock-up to go out in our Friday packet?
Yes, it will be, but it'll be there.
Okay.
It'll be there.
Okay. It will?
Yes.
I mean, I don't understand this. I mean, did we or did we not have honors before in this school district?
But
Yeah, Sharice, that was a different position. It wasn't a matter of maintaining even this. I think that it's much more simplified than the way the teaming came in and the honors came out. I sat at the board, I asked questions, I did think of the questions regarding the teaming, the loss of block instruction. The honors question wasn't raised, and so it was an unmentioned thing. But we're down to one issue here. This is not something that he can just not include or forget about, because he's saying that it will be like this with one additional level that will say a 6.0. Now, there isn't anything not to recognize or not to follow up on, and I certainly would think that recognizing the board, the accountability would be there. It would be foolish.
Dr. Bond has just assured all the board members that we will have a mock-up in our packet on Friday.
Let me just ask one basic question, and I have no problem with a mock-up.
We'll stay with your questions. We kind of left from Sharice and went over to you. I'd like to get some order back here, so I'll allow you to finish your question. And I'd like to come back to Mrs. Krieger if she has any more questions, and then we'll come back to Mrs. Mangle.
Okay. Dr. Bond, this is really for the sake of concern over the prioritizing of your time and your energies, as we have things that have to be initiated. And sometimes you can't always just move things from item list number 3 up to number 1 without sacrificing something even more relevant. This program of studies that we are sitting here with will be exactly the same, with the exception of an additional course level under the curriculum areas. Would it suffice simply to say specifically which courses that 6.0 level applies to, so that you are aware of what involves an honors program? In other words, if he simply gives you, if he simply lists, these will be the 6.0
Yes,
items,
no
so,
problem.
because you may not all know that, you may not know where it changes from electives to
Good
there.
idea.
Will that do?
Good idea.
And then he can move forward and we'll be okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That
Okay.
sounds good.
Back,
No, that's-
Dr. Bond, do you have a comment?
Okay.
Okay. Mrs. Krieger, do you have any additional comments?
I was not asking Dr. Bond to reinvent the wheel. I figured this was something very easy. It could have been retrieved from our archives since we have had honors
No, he
before.
won't. There's gonna be change.
So, just,
It's not, you can't retrieve it from the archives.
well.
Just as simple as.
But I'll take care of it. I just
No.
assume, I'll take care of it. I mean, I'll do it.
Dr. Vaughn, I don't
Okay,
think.
okay, let's get back to our.
Thank you.
Back to Don.
We believe you.
I believe you.
No, she doesn't.
Some of that coffee.
Dr. Bond, Program of Studies, new matter. When are the high school Program of Studies going to come forward? 9 through 12. When's that scheduled?
The high school meeting is scheduled for the 8th of February for parents.
No.
No.
No, it's
No, I
already
mean,
happened.
Well, I don't know.
okay.
Well, I don't know. What grade am I in this week? What is it?
It's done. They're registering classes.
Okay, when they come back to the board, what month are they coming back?
Drop small
Yeah.
classes.
Right, this
Drop
Thursday's
small
meeting of
classes.
parents. 8 and the 9. What you ask me?
That's what you just said.
When's the high
When you
school?
come
Hold on,
forward, the
hold on,
Program of
hold
Studies
on.
from
We
the high
wanna-
school.
The high school
Clarify.
program of studies, right? We're talking about 10,
Yes,
11, and 12.
yes, yeah, when is that, what month is that coming in?
High school program of studies has been approved.
Yes.
Right, but when are you coming, what month? I'm just trying to get an idea on my calendar here, the month that you plan on coming back with the adds, deletes,
Oh,
changes.
that. Oh, April.
Is it April? Okay, that's when that budget
It's
starts,
during
okay.
budget time.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just a point of information or a request here, there was a proposal given by an independent member of the community, an Alan Gold, in regards to independent studies for students 9 through 12. I'd appreciate it. It went to all the cabinet, went to the board members. I'd appreciate it if you would review that and, in some way either get back to
That's
Mr.
a-
Gold or ourselves the merits of
That's
this
a part
idea.
of a bigger package that I want to come forward with, has to do with summer school and a lot of other things.
So
That's-
you're
that-
aware of this and something is
I'm-
forthcoming.
I'm aware of that, but to treat that independently means that we could have several meetings, because there's several things like that we want to talk about.
Okay, did you have this though from Mr.
Yes.
Gold? Okay.
That's been under consideration for some time.
Have to wait.
All right, Mr. Gold's in the audience
Yes.
tonight, and I promised that I would
That's no problem.
bring this forward, and I found the reading intriguing.
No problem.
Okay,
As soon as I get-
that's it, thank you.
Mr. Hill,
No questions.
Mr. White, Mr. Schilling,
No questions.
Mr. Mosey,
No question.
Mr. Allen,
No question.
no questions. I'll open it to the audience of citizens.
No question.
No questions.
It'll be on the agenda?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
There is somebody coming.
This is, I believe it's Mr. Gold.
Alan Gold, Lansdale. My proposal, I feel, requires a little more groundwork than just being included with a lot of other things, because independent study may require getting past certain restrictions from the state regarding getting credit for courses that you can take. And there's formidable roadblocks to doing this from the teachers' union and politicians, perhaps. One of the least problems that we have is that there are plenty of volunteers from the community that I've approached that will gladly supervise classrooms of students over the summer who want to just come to review their programmed instruction workbooks, which they have are excellent now in many of the basic subjects. I think if students take 1, 2, or 3 courses in the summer, and they can, 3 courses each summer will eliminate 1 year of work. And will the students do it? It will require promotion, require incentive, and it will require reward for the students. I'm thinking of charging maybe a modest fee, $20 for registration, so they just won't get the book and throw it in the closet, and they get the money back if they pass the course. And those that do B or better may get a dance or a trip to a concert or something. I think the proposal I'd like to make wider, but I thank those on the board and Donna Mangle who have brought this up and let me present it so you can think about it. Now it's not too late to start, but we need to do work which I'm not going to begin, or whoever you may assign to do, we're not going to begin unless it is approved by the board and the administrators with their backing to go to the next level to see how to do this. But I think if it works half as well as I anticipate, it will alleviate overcrowding, because if it works in the summer, maybe even it work during the school year too, it will cost very little for this additional instruction, because with the improvements in software for computers and the excellent program workbooks, students really can put themselves through this, and in my opinion, it will produce better results for those students taking advantage of this particular avenue, better than they would have done had they gone to a normal classroom.
Mr. Gold,
yes.
I need to ask you to bring your comments to close. In all
Okay.
fairness to
You're
everybody,
right.
as an audience of citizens, your 3 minutes is about up.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
believe we could discuss this further.
Okay, is this something, though, that you would vote on to put, to give an
I don't
okay?
believe
We need more discussion, I think.
I don't
Well, we
believe
would
so.
only need when it was being instituted as a part of a formal
You need more
program.
discussion, I think.
It's
Just a summer libraries or
Ladies and
summer
gentlemen,
school
in all, I
programs.
think that Mr. Gold's proposal has a lot of merit.
It has a lot of merit.
But
Juan.
I'm here to tell you that we can only do so much at a time. And I, quite frankly, am maxed. I'm maxed. You just need to know that. And you can only do so much. And I think it has a tremendous amount of merit. And I've seen it work. I've seen it work. But we have to decide what it is we're going to do for the next few months.
How about if there's no cost to administrators or teachers required?
Mr. Gold, it has potential, but it's only a small part of what could be a much larger program. There's no reason why North Penn High School couldn't accelerate graduation for bright kids who might graduate at mid-year, who might take their mandatory coursework in summer school, and who may be admitted to colleges that have room, because we know that the most college failures occur after the freshman year, first semester. So a summer school program that offers a wide variety of electives or mandatory courses, accelerated graduation, even a mid-year graduation, and independent study could be a part of that, but it's only a small part of that.
It's not just for the
Certainly
bright,
will be
though.
considered
For everybody.
as a possible addition to that goal, should we adopt it.
Okay,
And you would be welcome to join us in working out the details.
okay, thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Any other questions? Okay, that will appear on the, program of studies will appear on the action agenda for next Thursday night. Okay, moving on to finance. Turn it over to Dennis.
Let me, that's all right, Mr. President, let me introduce the conversation and recognize the time. Dennis Kelly has prepared a timeline based upon our previous practice of adopting a school budget for the ensuing school year. There are things we need to know. For instance, we know the governor introduced the state budget today, which I haven't seen, which obviously affects school funding and school budgets, because it provides the state's portion of funding its public schools. And then the board has some interests and goals and intents, I'm sure it needs to make known too. So what we ought to be considering are the priorities of the board, the board's objectives in developing a new budget. We already know it wants it to be simpler, Reader's Digest type language, easy for the general public to understand, and we are preparing to submit to the board some suggestions that might accomplish that goal with your consent. And at this point, let me turn to my colleague, Mr. Kelly, who's prepared a timeline, and ask Dennis to review that. And then, to the extent the board wants to spend any more time tonight discussing some of its own objectives, we would be attentive in recording those as we prepare to follow up and respond. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Bose. Board members, what I've done is prepare a timeline based on where we've been for the past few years. I know there has been a lot of discussion about changing items. What I'd like to throw out at you is this. I've contacted 2 districts, one in Pennsylvania, one in New Jersey, considering zero-based budgeting because I know that was a concern. What I've found out is that that's more or less a year-long procedure. That's not something that's done overnight. That changes a whole mindset in not only administrators, but down to the principal, down to the teacher level on how a budget's developed. What I'm currently in the process of doing, as Dr. Bose stated, is making a budget document that's user-friendly based on some of the recommendations and questions that you've asked before. What I'm proposing is that we go along with what I think has been a successful method of operation where we have the liaison meetings. I know some of the new board members are not aware of those meetings, but I think in the past they've been very successful in making the budget, at least in your area that you're responsible for, more accessible to you, more open to you, that you know what's going on. I had said to Dr. Bose that we needed this discussion in order to get direction from you. A fact that I think is very important to know is, I sat with today and went over with Dr. Bose, 93% of our current budget is really a fixed cost. When I say fixed cost, we have 72% in salary and benefits, but when you add in utilities, insurance, the VOTEC tuition, IU, that's $800,000 we pay to the IU for those expenses. When you add them all together, you end up with 93% of the budget. That leaves 7% of the budget that really you can do something with, other than do something with salaries. So I wanted to get some direction from you by preparing this and see where you want to go with this.
Okay. I'll open it up. Mr. Mosey.
The only question I have was, we had talked informally among ourselves about moving the budgetary process up. We initially talked about February, and then the recent discussions we had, we talked about March, and now I look and I see April, and I see a regular work session, I see a regular board meeting, and then a projection of possible 3 budget meetings in April. I would like to see the process start in March, Mr. Clemens, what we originally discussed. I just think that April, you know, and again, we're only picking up 1 month, where normally the process started in May, and the budget had to be decided by June. I don't know if 1 month's going to be enough to really, you know, look at this. And you're looking at creating a heavy month.
That's why we're having this discussion, Mr. Mosey.
What
I would like to see us go back to March, as some of us have discussed in the recent weeks.
What I would recommend, Mr. Mosey, is that we do the liaison meetings in March so that the budget process actually for the board members individually starts in March, but we start putting it together in April.
Yeah, but Dennis, these meetings are open to the public, are they not? These 3 budget meetings?
Yes, they are, very much so.
Well, I've sat in on them in the past. They can be long, detailed meetings. And you're just going to inundate us in April. You're going to wear us out in April.
Then are you saying you want to cut a meeting in April, or you want to add meetings in March?
I would like to see it start in March, as some of us have discussed in recent weeks. We initially talked about February, and then all of a sudden it got pushed back to March, and now we're back into April. Before you know it, we'll be back into May. No, I think some of these areas and some of these departments, we made a promise in the campaign we were going to address some of these things. Some of us said we're going to look at department by department, and I think we need time to do that. And I don't know how the other board members feel, but I would like to stick with some of our initial conversations and start this process in March. And if we get it done before May, then we're ahead of the game. But we're not going to bury ourselves with a heavy schedule in April. I mean, the work sessions and the board meetings take time, and then we're going to have budgetary meetings, which are going to be open to the public. And they have every right. I have no problem with that. But I've sat in the budget meetings last year. There was some 4-hour meetings. They're long. And I would like to stretch it out. If we started in March, perhaps we can spread it out, and we won't be inundated in 1 month. And David's looking at his calendar already. He may not even be able to attend.
That wasn't the issue.
But I would like to see it spread out, that's all. I think starting in March, we wouldn't be pressed for time. We could schedule the meetings on maybe have 1 a week instead of having 2 a week. And it would be less of a workload on the board with the other things we have to do.
I'd like to hear some more dialogue. How about some comments from over here? This side.
Finance liaison?
as finance liaison.
As finance liaison, some of this is a bit of a surprise to me. I had spoken to Mr. Kelly back quite a while ago regarding zero-based budgeting, as well as some of the board members' desires to begin the budget process earlier. It's not really until now that I find that both the zero-based budgeting and the earlier start isn't working out. We spoke last summer, Dennis, on zero-based budgeting, and then after Mr. Roman came on board, Mr. Clemens was president, there was also discussion about implementing a zero-based budget process. Are you saying now at this point there is no way to implement?
At this point, Mrs. Shar, yes, that's what I would say, because even though it was discussed last year, we really had no direction from the board to do it. And as I said before, I'm no expert on that. I need to understand what it is. There are very few districts in the state of Pennsylvania that do it. Those who have, it's kind of been a once and done because of the, I guess, the amount of training and all that has to go into it. So there wasn't a lot of fallback to go to you know, to come up with a way to implement this. The people I've spoken to, though, say it is a year-long kind of procedure where you have to go back and readjust everyone's mindset on doing the budget.
Well, absolutely, mindset has changed in preparing. But as of November, it was pretty well established that zero-based budgeting would be the desired method of accounting. Can we do...
I need to clarify that,
Yeah.
Mrs. Scher. I don't remember a consensus or a vote from this board
No, we didn't have a vote.
that there, I don't believe there was a voter consensus to go to zero-based budgeting. I don't remember consenting or voting on that, and I'll open that up to other board
Mr.
members.
Clemens, when Ms. Shear gave her finance report, when was that, Vicki? In December?
And also, it was from a previous discussion of this
She fully
board.
disclosed the conversations that she's had with members of this new board on their feelings about the coming budget process.
Right?
I'm as surprised as she is to learn tonight that somehow zero-based budgeting is now going to involve a year-long process to get those involved with establishing the budget into a different mindset. I think, for a point of clarification, Mr. Kelly, I'd like to know, what is the present mindset for establishing our budget?
All budgets start the year ahead. I mean, as of the beginning of this budget.
Would you explain that to me,
Let's
Mrs. Chair, so I
turn
can
to
understand that
Mr.
better?
Kelly.
From what, you know, from what I've gathered from those districts that use it, it's getting down to exactly how many pencils, how much paper, how much everything you buy. It's more or less qualifying it by class, by student. I mean, you're starting from zero. Right now we work on an allocation method. There's an allocation given. If you have 700 students in your school, you get 700 times that dollar figure, and that's what you base your budget on. What you want to go to is a no allocation method that starts at zero, where each teacher develops exactly what's needed in that classroom for the year, and then that principal then has to combine all that for each classroom, each course.
You have a definition
And then, I mean,
zero-based
Right. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Now, Mrs. Krieger, I'm going to stop you as board president. We do have some clarification. We can take this back to the misconceptions or of what team teaching is all about. And I don't even believe that all the board members here, sitting here, even understand what zero-based budgeting is all about. I went to our accountants at our company and I found out a lot about it. I don't necessarily support it. I did read in the part where it was a fad of Jimmy Carter in the 70s. And he's the man who was big on zero-based budgeting. But I'll come back to the question. I don't remember a majority of this board definitely giving Dennis a green light that we are going to go to zero-based budgeting. I don't remember that. Now, someone else can if there's a majority here that says that and they want to correct me, I'll stand to be corrected.
I think it's obvious that the definition for zero-based budgeting is as varied as this board is. And I don't think we ever got on the same page as to that definition. When you're counting pencils, that's not where I factor in zero-based budgeting. But if we bought 3 buses last year, and X number of dollars for those buses were put into the transportation department, you're coming back this year, and now you're going to extrapolate your budget from here forward when you already bought those buses.
And those buses
wrongy.
Well, then-
Recurring expenses.
Okay, so there's
Okay.
things that budget just keeps getting fatter and fatter. It's got, all
Well, then I guess it gets
the
back to what
deception
Mr.
of the potted
Clements-
bra. And I think it just needs to be, you
Sure.
take it back to where
But
you
it gets
purchases
back to
are
what
made
Mr.
or then
Clements
subtracted.
said. I mean, zero-based budgeting, if that's the terminology that was used, that's the method I've given you. That's, those districts that went to zero-based budgeting, that's exactly what they did. It went from
Do
classroom.
you need a definition?
We need a definition, yeah, I guess, and I guess that's what it talks about budget development. We need a definition from the board, what you want us to do.
Dennis, several months ago, I asked that you forward on articles on zero-based budgeting that would give the board some understanding. I don't believe they've ever received them. Could you please put that down to follow through on the superintendent's
Yes,
article?
I looked in Dr. Elko's files, because that's where I remembered them to be, because he had the zero-based budgeting. I don't know what, there's nothing
Okay.
of that in his files.
Then I need to go through mine. It was the superintendent, and it was either the school board journal that it was, or educator. But at any rate, I did say that, this is what the direction was going to be, and if there were any disagreements or whatever, please let me know. And my understanding was, I apologize, Mr. Clemens, if you wanted to go further, but the idea is that we have never really had an accounting of recurring tax dollars
I agree
for
with that.
single,
I
one-time
agree with that.
expenses.
Right, right.
And we always hear, well, these are 10 mills that are being added, but yet there were 20 mills that we charge for each
right.
year that are no longer being used for that same purpose, and no one has a
wholeheartedly
clue where
agree
they
with
went.
that.
Okay.
But I don't know that we need
No
to have
one ha-
Dennis start at square one.
I don't think I told them we had to count pencils. There should be generally a breakdown though, so that it's not, you're not automatically budgeting $700 in books at this school because you budgeted $600 last year, if in fact, all those books are new, they're not really being
Correct.
used. That's why we have so many budget transfers.
Tommy, why don't you put this back committee level and let
Yeah.
finance
Board committee,
committee
yeah.
Let them make a
work with Kelly and make a
recommendation.
recommendation how they're gonna get it
Let's
done
look at-
within the
let's
time
look
frame
at
they gotta
starting
get it
in
done.
March.
I'll also bring forward a copy of that December report
Okay.
for you to
Let's-
all review.
Okay, Don, Vicki and Don are the finance liaisons.
We quit.
I just want to say, I agree with the concerns that Mrs. Sherrod and Mrs. Krieger have. And like for technology last year, we put a lot of money into technology, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And certainly in years past, a lot of times, well, let's roll it over again in the budget.
That's
I
what it
think the
does.
message that this board wanted to send you is we're not going to accept just you rolling all this stuff over because we did it the year before that way.
Right, and
thought
I
you
agree
got
with that too,
message
Mr.
loud
Clements.
and- Loudly and clearly.
And that's why I'm hoping that the new design of the budget will be a lot easier for the board members to use and see where the money is and where we're going.
I think if what I restated before, I think if the finance committee can work with you to show us how that can be accomplished, so we don't be rolling over costs over year after year, instead of going back to a true zero-based budgeting, or some event of that, that probably may be satisfactory, but I think we need to do that at a committee level, not at a board level. We'll be here for a week.
But can the committee work, now we need to go back to Dennis's request about liaisons working. Can the liaisons get that work done in February, that we could have a budget, at
Vicki
least a
says she
preliminary
can do
budget
that.
in March? Back to Pat's request. Now,
Well, I would say that the most you can hope for is really probably mid-March, late March, I think. Otherwise, but you're gonna have to, Dennis is gonna have to speak with me.
If we can pick up a week or two, that's fine. I'm just looking at possible 5 or 6 meetings in April.
And what you do have too is that,
And I think to do it right, we should give it our undivided attention, and we should really scrutinize the budget. And,
Right.
you know, I sat here last year, and some of those meetings just on personnel and transportation lasted for hours.
Tommy, I think we've got to define how we're going to do it with Dennis. We've got to define that, and I think we can do that
I'll talk.
in February. We can define what it's going to look like and how it's going to be. Then we can put the time frame with it.
Right.
Okay.
And maybe we can just start it in March. But first, we've got to define where we're going.
Absolutely.
Before we plan how we're going to get there.
Right.
Okay. And you have to,
but then you and Vicki are, as liaisons, are gonna have to work
Vicki and
with
Don.
Dennis.
Put her first.
yes. I am-
Vicki and Don, yes.
Vicki and Don show.
Vicki and Don show.
You are on board. More questions or comments? David?
Dennis, do we at this time have
a budgetary designation for computers, technologies, phone systems, satellite, cable, TV, technology. Budgetary line item, number designation.
Yes, there's, under the technology component of the budget, there's a new equipment, replacement equipment, it would fall under there.
Okay, but there is now a separate line item, so we can consider technology purchases separate from elementary, separate from secondary, separate, it's a separate item.
I think you're
Something that can be directly budgeted dollars to that line item.
What would we do that's not elementary or secondary? I think you're losing me on
Administrative.
I mean,
You mean
we
just-
have wrapped technology in the past, and again, I'm not exactly clear, but into secondary instruction, elementary instruction, as part of instruction, what I'm saying is, can we get a line item for technology so that we understand exactly what we're spending on technology? And then as we discuss what technology we propose to buy, we understand where it's going instead of the other way around.
Most definitely. You can create a line item for any purpose that you wish.
Then
You
I'd
want
like
it by
to recommend-
object.
I'd like to recommend to the Finance Committee that we take a look at that so that we are constantly in the mode of saying technology, dollars budgeted, so that it can be justified in reverse of what it's been now, rather than saying, in the elementary level, I need X number of computers, it's an elementary item. I want to be able to start doing that in the future, because if all of us hold to our commitments about wanting to upgrade the technology level in the school district, we need to understand how much precisely it costs.
By
As-
object, I assume, David.
By object.
Right, by object accounting of the technology. Well, there, you'll see many times, you'll see 300,000 being spent each year, but quite frankly, it's the first time you've levied it. That isn't, it's a new taxation for the taxpayer's perspective. They're now paying that 1 mil over and over again, but it is not the additional part of, it's not a part of the increase that's following. And I think this also gives you some hope for looking at that and reviewing what's truly escalating and what's absorbing recurring tax dollars for all of us. And as far as the summary is concerned, we've always had a budget summary. I get concerned when the budget gives, it becomes too condensed because it has no meaning at all. I had spoken with Dennis to see that we could get reviews that give us, the comparisons, puts in the number of staff that's represented by salary levels. I mean, you see
Well,
a
Mr. Sharp,
department and
and
all
that
this.
is part of what, the new budget will give each, especially the new board members, a description of what's exactly in each section of the budget with staffing, with salaries. It will have all that for them. But it will be at least in a condensed version. Instead of all the line items, you're gonna have salaries together, but at least you'll know the number of people in each, and the number of secretaries, the number of maintenance people. You'll have a number that you can attach to every salary figure in the budget.
Well, we can discuss the rest of it at another time. It's really late,
There'll
but
be
there are
separate
some
lists of each
initiatives. We'll talk with Don and then we'll bring a presentation.
I wrote Reader's Digest user-friendly.
That's
I'll
right.
make sure I, okay. Any
I
comment?
am Joe's budget.
I said that, I think Dr. Bose said that. More, we need to wrap this up. More questions or comments on the budget?
No questions.
I think what I'm hearing is we still want to make an attempt to start the budget towards the end of March.
Now, do you want a separate meeting for that, or do you want to start it at
Probably have to look
a
into,
monthly meeting?
we'll probably have to look into a
Let's
separate
have the
meeting.
Finance Committee
Okay.
come
Well,
with you,
let
then come
us
back
follow
with
through,
a
because it
schedule.
may be distribution to the board along with the
Right, okay.
liaison meetings and then back to
Any
us.
other questions out here?
Once we know, we'll
Okay, now,
give it a schedule.
questions or comments from the audience? Mr. Anderson?
I have one.
Okay, we can.
Tolerance a minute of instruction, because I think I'd like to make a modest proposal how you could get at least halfway where you'd like to be. The idea behind zero-based budgeting is compared to ordinary budgeting is that rather than doing cost plus, which is your basic spreadsheet that just extrapolates for a certain number of periods, you cause those who submit their budget request to have to justify why they're asking for what they're asking for. That doesn't necessarily have to get down to the pencil level, but it does need to articulate in large categories why it is you think you need what you need. For example, why your department needs 3 secretaries and not 2, for example. It's designed to weed out things of that nature. It is a mindset thing, as Mr. Kelly said. You have to get those who prepare the budgets at the department head level or the principal level to understand justifying those things atomically rather than just saying, here's a bunch of money, figure out how to spend it at your school. And I think you can get halfway there without necessarily getting to that level of detail even this year, or at least as the department heads submit their budget this year, make them be thinking about the budget along those lines rather than the way they had traditionally thought about it. You won't be fully to zero-based budgeting, but you'll have them into the mindset, and I think you'll find as you review the line items that they submit to you, you'll have a better understanding of categorically how the money is being spent. So I think that's probably worth considering as the request you make to your department heads in terms of how they submit their requests for this year. So it is certainly going to be more work on Mr. Kelly's time as well, because he'll need to review whether those requests seem reasonable. But what it ends up happening is if you're used to giving a certain amount of money to a particular area, and at a categorical level, they can't really justify why they're getting that much money, and they end up with 20% in miscellaneous, then probably there is some padding that they're using just to try to keep claiming as much money as they're used to getting.
I don't want to prolong this, but just so that the board or the public doesn't think that there's, when we give the allocations to the principals, we give the principals the leeway to go in either instructional supplies or books, special ed, their library, their AV. We don't just throw the money at a particular item. It is up to the principals to decide whether they need library books or AV materials. So, I mean, I don't want anyone in the public to think that this is what we're doing, but it's because it's not.
There's a further explanation, too. We have, for as long as I've been here, we've had to justify our request.
Isn't that what 10 budget meetings have always been about?
Justifying
those requests.
If I need 3 secretaries, we do exactly what Greg's saying. We say we need 3 secretaries for this reason. If we can't justify it, we don't get it. So
then you have the process more underway maybe than perhaps you expected that you do. You may very well have this process underway more than you even
I think so.
expect to do.
I think
The other 2 things I would bring up is that as part of that, typically you need to categorize each expenditure as to whether it is of a recurring nature or an extraordinary nature. Extraordinary meaning we need it this year, but it's not something that would come up. That way you can develop what your core budget is versus the items that occur only from time to time. The other thing I was surprised to learn is that there is no way to ask what the budget is school by school, and I'm wondering if the board would like to consider whether they want to provide that information in the next year, because as I learned, you can't ask what is the budget at Montgomery Elementary School. Nobody can give you that answer right now. And I think the board should decide whether or not they would like to have this budget articulated in that way. That's it.
We'll send that to the finance
liaisons. That's been under discussion that we could have,
Like a list, huh?
as a part of this extra information, I think actually
Schedule a
simplifies the
weekend.
budget, is that there was discussion with Dennis and I, also to have the enrollment to have at the elementary school, and then you do have the actual budget. It's sort of like be able to have a financial assessment, school by school. But as far as what you're saying, Greg, in other words, if I want the figures for the high school, with just very few exceptions, there are some items, as you know, in the budget that are just grouped under a secondary ed, and that one becomes more difficult. But essentially, the high school or any one of the schools can be picked out through the account number on that budget. And Dennis can just program into his computer and pull that out.
Just like that.
It's just
program.
Yes, there is.
Well, there is a regular,
There is.
Mr. Anderson, there's a regular coding scheme by school. Unfortunately, there are some items that are, such as copying expenses that are put together. So you're probably gonna get 85% of a school's budget. You're not gonna get 100%.
And then you can also pull those that are grouped as general elementary, and from there, if you want to add a ratio. But you can, in other words, you can get pretty much a nearly total breakdown of the elementary, of, say, the high school and what have you. If you'd like, sometime if you budget, I'll just show you, or Dennis can, exactly what it is.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay.
Do we get a line item
I
veto
have
in
an
this?
announcement.
Line item veto.
There will be a meeting, I believe it's in the paper. There will be a meeting Thursday night here at 7:30 to discuss facilities.
This is for lack of a
For lack of a better word.
Your secondary ed.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second. Meeting adjourned.